settle in. Let your mind grow quiet. The room around you softens and the outside world fades into a gentle hush. For the next 2 hours, you'll drift back in time to a place far across the sea, where wooden ships ruled the waves and ambition rode on salted wines. We're going to the Netherlands during its golden age, a time of towering trade empires, fine art, and a society caught between elegance and exhaustion. But this isn't the story of kings and crowns. This is the story of the ones who carried timber on their backs, whose hands never stopped aching, and who slept under roofs that leaked. You walk the fog-damp alleyways of Amsterdam, hear the dull hammer of a caulker's mallet, and feel the salt-stiff wind that blew through every poor man's coat. There were dreams in those days, yes, but they came at a cost. In these stories, you'll hear of shipbuilders and sailors, of exotic voyages and quiet tragedies, of fortunes made and lost in the flicker of a candle. So breathe in gently. The cobblestones are slick with morning mist. The docks are waiting. Let's begin your journey into the Dutch Golden Age, one wooden beam at a time. Chapter 1. Building a ship keel by lamplight in Amsterdam. The day begins before the sun dares to rise. In the shadows of Amsterdam's eastern shipyards, the air is thick with wood smoke and dew. Somewhere far off, church bells toll through the fog, but their sound barely reaches the rows of sheds lined along the canal. The world here smells of pitch and pine, old sweat, and the faint metallic tongue of iron nails cooling in buckets of ash. You are a laborer, and your hands are already calloused. By the time most of the city stirs awake, your back is sore and damp from lifting green oak beams soaked in last night's rain. The keel, the very backbone of the vessel, is being shaped slowly, painfully. It must be right. One wrong angle, one knot in the grain, and the whole hull could twist at sea. There's no machinery to help you. Only pulleys, muscle, and tradition passed down through generations of men who rarely lived past 50. Tools are shared. Saws dull quickly. Splinters are constant, often deep and ignored. Nails are expensive, and bosses check everyone. If you bend too many, your wages are docked. But that's not the worst of it. The foreman is a former sailor who lost 3 toes in the East Indies. He walks with a limp and a stick, but his voice is loud and sharp. If you're too slow, he notices. If your posture sags, he notices. If your fingers bleed, he tells you to toughen up. This isn't a trade, he reminds the younger workers. It's survival. You earn your bread by the inch of timber you shape. At midday, the work stops for bread and weak beer. Not because it's time to rest, but because the beer is safer than the water. You sit on a bundle of rope near the dry dock and chew slowly. The bread is dense, baked days ago, and crumbles like dry clay. Sometimes it contains weevils. Nobody picks them out anymore. One man near you pulls up his pant leg. His shin is swollen and red. A nail went through his boot last week, and he hasn't had time to clean the wound. He jokes that it smells worse than the canal, and everyone laughs, but nobody really finds it funny. You all know what happens when those wounds turn black. You've seen it before. You've heard the priests speak soft Latin over a man who once swung a hammer harder than anyone. He died in a corner of the yard, wrapped in burlap, forgotten by payday. When the meal ends, the shadows have shifted. The sun rises reluctantly, blocked by factory roofs and soot-thick chimneys. You return to your station by the keel. The boards are beginning to take shape, curved and ribbed like the inside of a massive fish. The ship will be named something bold and hopeful, perhaps De Zeewind or New Amsterdam, but you'll never sail on it. You'll never even see it touch the sea. By the time the sun begins to dip again, your arms ache from hours of hammering. You and the others move slower now, hands numb with chill and effort. One man collapses briefly near the soffit. He's helped up and given another swig of beer. No doctor. No medicine, just grit. As night falls, the lanterns are lit. Their glow is orange and unsteady, casting long shadows across the hull like the ribs of a ghost. The ship seems to breathe now, alive with potential and pain. You crouch beneath it, driving iron pegs into wet planks, your hands raw. Sometimes the lanterns blow out in the wind and must be relit with trembling fingers. When the shift ends, you don't go home. Not exactly. You sleep in the workers' barracks nearby. The roof leaks. The straw is damp. Lice crawl freely. A man snores beside you, louder than the sea. Another mutters in his sleep about fires in Batavia. A rat scurries past your head and disappears behind a stack of boots. But you're too tired to care, too tired to dream. You lie there, your body sinking into the scratchy straw, still smelling of pitch and tar, and you think of the ship. The one you'll never board. The one that will carry spices, gold, letters, or perhaps soldiers off to places you'll only ever hear about from men who come back limping. That is, if they come back at all. And so the rhythm continues. Another dawn, another keel, another backbent service to something that will always sail away without you. Chapter 2. The Sinking of the Batavia. Now let yourself drift from the smoky shipyards of Amsterdam, eastward across open water. It is the year 1628, and a new vessel is setting sail, a magnificent ship christened Batavia, bound for the spice-rich lands of the Dutch East Indies. She is a marvel of the time, over 100 feet long, carved with gilded scrollwork and lion-headed figureheads. Below decks, she carries cannon, crates of wine, barrels of salted meat, and casks of silver coins intended to trade with the sultans of Asia. But her most precious cargo cannot be measured in gold. She carries people, over 300 of them, in fact. Sailors, soldiers, merchants, women, children, some bound for duty, some for fortune, some simply to escape. Imagine yourself on board in the early days of the voyage. The sun is high, the sails catch the wind like wings. Gulls scream in the distance. The air is still fresh, the mood is hopeful. But even here, even now, there are signs, subtle ones. The captain, Francisco Pelsard, is respected but remote. The under-merchant Geronimus Cornelis keeps mostly to himself, a failed apothecary with dark eyes and darker ambitions. And tensions flicker like candlelight between the crew and the officers. Mutiny whispers, already forming in corners. Weeks pass. The ocean grows less gentle. The air thickens with tropical humidity. Men grow irritable. Salt rations spoil. Water goes brackish. Below decks, passengers suffer. The ceilings are low. Ventilation is poor. Children cry in the heat. Rats multiply. Fights break out. Somewhere in the hold, a woman is caught stealing extra water. Punishment is swift and cruel, and yet thirst drives others to do the same. And then, one night, it happens. You are asleep in a wooden hammock when the ship lurches violently. Shouts echo down the corridors. Boots thunder overhead. A grinding noise deep, unnatural rips through the hull like a groan from the earth itself. The Batavia has struck a reef. Off the coast of what is now Western Australia, in shallow waters near the Abrolhos Islands, she begins to break apart. Panic spreads faster than fire. Some crewmen leap into the Black Sea. Others cling to the collapsing deck. Captain Pelsard gives orders, but chaos drowns discipline. In the end, the ship is lost, shattered, wrecked upon the coral, her beautiful frame splintered into driftwood. Somehow, most of the people survive the crash itself. But survival on land, you soon realize, will be far worse. You find yourself among the castaways on a flat, sun-blasted island. A desert of rock and salt with no trees, no fresh water, and no shelter. Supplies are salvaged from the wreck, but they are meager. Rations are scarce. Tempers fray. The captain and a small crew take a longboat and disappear into the horizon, promising to fetch help from Batavia's destination, the port of Java. That leaves the rest, over 200 men, women, and children marooned, leaderless, and desperate. And that is when Geronimus Cornelis steps forward. He is soft-spoken, almost gentle, and wears a calm smile that masks his true intent. With the captain gone, he sees opportunity. He speaks of order, of rationing food, protecting the women, guarding the precious cargo still buried beneath the waves. At first, many listen. His words are reasonable. He seems to care. He promises to protect them all. But his kindness is only a veil. Beneath it lies a hunger for control so complete it will soon turn this island into a nightmare. Geronimus selects a few loyal followers from among the soldiers and sailors' men as desperate, and broken as himself, and begins building what amounts to his own private regime. The sick are denied food. The weak are cast aside. Those who question him vanish. A man caught stealing a scrap of bread is thrown into the sea. A woman who cries too loudly is tied to a rock and left for the gulls. The island is quiet now, but it's not peaceful. You cannot sleep. You lie on hot sand, curled beside a crumbling outcrop, and you hear the wind pass over dead coral and broken dreams. Around you, others whisper in hushed tones. Some speak of escape. Others simply weep. Every morning, Jeronimus's men grow bolder. They drink wine taken from the wreck and walk the sand with stolen swords. The island is theirs now, and they know it. No one is safe. Not the old, not the young, not the innocent. Jeronimus begins selecting the women, deciding who will serve, who will belong to his group, and who will be discarded. It is a descent into something primal, something that feels less like a colony and more like a cruel experiment in human darkness. One man, a soldier named Weeb Hayes, is sent away under the pretense of searching for water on a nearby islet. Jeronimus hopes he will die, but Hayes survives. He finds fresh water, builds shelter, and begins gathering allies. Quietly, without ceremony, a resistance is born, and so the island waits. The sun burns overhead. The wreck of the Batavia lies half submerged in the shallows, a reminder of everything lost and everything yet to be destroyed. You are here, caught between a madman and a flickering hope, knowing help may come. Or it may not. The wind does not stop. It rushes over the reef and hums between the stones like a whispered warning. On the sandy treeless island that Jeronimus Cornelis now controls, a hollow silence hangs in the air. Any glance held too long. Any word uttered at the wrong moment could mark you. A woman next to you begins praying out loud. She isn't seen again after nightfall. Each disappearance carves into the rest of you a deeper understanding. This is not a waiting game for rescue. And through it all, no sails appear on the horizon. A shape is spotted in the distance, a mast, a moving dot on the blue line of the sea. Haze signals, smoke rises. On the reef, Cornelis panics. He tries to hold on to power, to regroup, to convince others that he still holds the upper hand. But it's too late. No birds arrive with news. You remain under the oppressive rule of a man who no longer even pretends to justify his actions. Cornelis has stopped planning, stopped rationing. His group drinks deeply each night and stumbles through each day, their madness now open and unchecked. Its wreck revealed not just the vulnerability of timber and canvas, but the fragility of human decency when stripped of laws and walls. You carry that knowledge with you, the story of a journey that never reached its destination. Of a voyage meant for profit that became a lesson in the cost of ambition, cruelty, and survival. In the end, the ship was not swallowed by the sea. It was torn apart by the people it carried. In its wake, it brings judgment. Helsert listens to the accounts, sees the wreckage, and pieces together what unfolded while he was gone. Cornelis is arrested. Many of his followers are tried on the beach where their crimes took place. And beneath every leader is a shadow. No court, no long deliberations. Punishment comes quickly. Not out of vengeance, but from the grim necessity of restoring order to what had become something feral. This is a test of endurance, of silence, of whether you can vanish into yourself long enough to survive the days. Only the slow, stunned process of preparing to leave. The dead are buried or left behind. The living board the ship. The remains of the Batavia creak under the waves. Still visible in low tide, its spine jutting from the water like the bones of a failed ambition. Broken only by the low murmur of waves and the cautious steps of the few survivors who still hope to avoid his gaze. You do not speak. Neither do the others. Too much was lost there. Too many truths revealed. The ocean surrounds you once again, but this time, its silence is comforting. It does not demand. It does not lie. It merely waits. After a harrowing 33-day journey across open ocean, the captain found help. Now he is back with a ship, soldiers and justice in his hands. The men loyal to him are becoming more reckless. They no longer hide their cruelty behind the excuse of order. He sends men to kill or capture Hayes and his growing group of dissenters. But the soldiers he sends are not the smartest or the strongest, those he keeps close, and so they fail. One by one, Hayes' defenders repel them, driving them back into the water with sharpened sticks and stone-tipped spears. They take what they want, demand obedience, and patrol the wreckage with sharpened blades and stolen wine sloshing in their bellies. You move quietly now, always aware of your surroundings. And still, somewhere beyond the shallows, the soldier Weeb Hayes is building something remarkable. On a separate islet several miles away, less visible, less controlled, he has managed to organize a rival camp. His men have found fresh water trickling from limestone. They've built crude walls from coral and driftwood. They fish by day and watch the horizon by night. Most importantly, they've begun to gather stories. Survivors who flee Cornelish's cruelty begin making their way toward Hayes' stronghold, often under moonlight, using the stars to guide their steps across sandbars and shallows. Cornelis is aware. He grows nervous. Power, once solid, now trembles beneath his feet. He orders raids on the water island. What began as a voyage, then a wreck, and then a brutal regime, has now become a civil war on a sliver of coral reef. Then, after months of fear and thirst and sunburned isolation, something changes. The longboat from Batavia's original captain, Telsert, has returned. And yet, the arrival of rescue does not erase the horrors. You watch as these judgments unfold, not with triumph, but with weariness. You are changed now. Everyone is. There is no celebration. Days later, as the ship pulls away from the reef, you find a place by the rail and stare at the shrinking shape of the island. The Batavia, once a symbol of trade and triumph, became something darker. And now, as you sail on toward Java, toward some unknown fate, the sails stretch high above once more, catching the wind like they did on that first hopeful day. But you know better now. Beneath every voyage is a risk. The Batavia is gone. But its ghosts, perhaps, still walk the reef in silence. Chapter 3. Tulip Mania and the Collapse of Wealth. The air in Haarlem feels like spring, but the air in the taverns feels like fever. The year is 1636, and the Dutch Republic is awash in wealth. The ships have returned heavy with spices. The markets are alive with trade. And in the windows of modest homes, something peculiar has begun to appear. Tulips. Not in bloom, not even in pots, but drawn carefully in ledgers, sketched in margins, and spoken of in hushed tones as if they were treasure maps. You are a bookkeeper for a merchant family, but lately your work has taken a strange turn. You no longer tally accounts of timber or spices. A breeze leaks through the door. Somewhere deep in your stomach, you feel the weight of something fragile. But promise is the right to buy or sell at a future date. Paper changes hands, not soil. Some buyers have never even touched a tulip, and yet they speak as though they own fields. One woman sells a futures contract for a bulb she doesn't yet possess. The man who buys it plans to resell it before the bloom. And the man who plans to buy from him? He's a cobbler who's never even seen a garden. Instead, you document flower bulbs, tiny, gnarled bulbs wrapped in waxy paper and worth more than some houses. But still, no one buys. People gather not just to buy, but to be seen. This is no longer about flowers. It's about belief, about speculation. The ledgers in your arms feel heavier than before. You step outside into the cold and look around. Nothing seems different. The canals still reflect the same sleepy sky. The chimneys still puff smoke. A child kicks snow into a puddle, but something has changed. A bulb thought to be worth 5,000 guilders fails to sell at auction. A merchant in Alkmaar closes his shop after losing his savings. Someone says the French are pulling out. Someone else claims the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire has declared tulips valueless. No one can confirm the news, but it spreads like frost along the edge of a window pane about being part of something too golden to question. Gardeners speak in terms of rarity, not soil. A maid who bought a bulb from her master's garden has tripled her earnings in a week. A brewer has sold all his beer casks to speculate on the next harvest. The ink-stained hands of men who used to trade linen and now only trade ideas. Your employer asks you to sell. Quietly. Don't let the others know. He's not panicking. He insists. The auctioneer, a man known for jokes and wine, now stares at the ledger in silence. A bulb that fetched 2,000 guilders last week draws no offers. He clears his throat and tries again. Still nothing. A second bulb goes unsold. Then a third, just being prudent. But his voice cracks a little when he says it. You nod and fold the parchment carefully. Behind your eyes, numbers churn. The margins are shrinking. The risk is no longer theoretical. And through it all, painters have begun to capture these bulbs as if they were relics delicate. Near mythical, their soft folds preserved in oil and glaze. A single Semper Augustus bulb, striped with vivid red and white, is rumored to have sold for enough to buy an entire canal-side home in Amsterdam. Men who stood on their collars bid beside men in velvet coats. It doesn't matter anymore what you wear. What matters is what you know, what bulbs are rising, which patterns are in demand, who will buy tomorrow. There's a man here who boasts he will retire by next summer. He's bought 5 bulbs and mortgaged his shop to do so. He's certain. Everyone is. At first you thought it was absurd, but now you sit at your desk, dipping your quill into ink, and write out contracts for tulips you've never seen bloom. Outside, the streets are humming. Wealthy merchants, once content to invest in ships and warehouses, now whisper about horticulture and color patterns. In the evenings, you visit the tavern. Tables once crowded with dice and cups now host auctions. You sip your beer and feel something strange. Excitement, yes, but also a creeping unease. A candle flickers on the table. The contracts have become more complex. People are now trading not the bulbs themselves. Every morning you walk past the flower markets, and it feels more like passing a cathedral than a trading post. But in quieter corners of town, there are murmurs. You begin to see it more clearly now. The nervous tapping of fingers. And then, one cold morning in February, it happens. No one bids. You're there. The tavern is full, but no one is speaking. Someone laughs, too loudly. It doesn't sound like amusement. It sounds like disbelief dressed up as humor. A chair scrapes. A mug tips over. When the room empties, you remain. The candle on your table has burned low. Something invisible. Something irreversible. The cold bites harder the next morning. Not because the wind has changed, but because the air feels different. Empty, like a room after a guest has gone. You walk past the market square and see that the flower stalls haven't opened. The merchants, usually so quick to lift their shutters, now keep their heads down. A man sweeps snow from his stoop with slow, careful strokes, as if waiting for something that will not return. The tulips are no longer on display, not even conversation. The silence around them is the loudest thing in town. At your desk, the books are still full of names, contracts, and promises. But already you know half of it will never be collected. The man who agreed to buy a viceroy bulb for 3,000 guilders hasn't returned to town. The carpenter who paid with credit has burned through his savings and is now offering to trade labor instead. A former brewer comes to your office in tears. He has no goods, no gold, and now no barrels. He asks if you'd accept a violin instead. He's never played it, but it belonged to his father. You don't know what to say. You don't need a violin. But the man's hands are trembling, so you take it. You set it gently in the corner, where it will collect dust alongside unpaid debts. Rumors move faster now, slippery and hard to pin down. Some say the government will intervene and declare the contracts null. Others say the States General will force buyers to honor them. Meetings are held in secret rooms. Church leaders begin sermons about greed and false idols. You hear one priest call tulips the devil's currency. But it's not anger that fills the streets, it's shame. Quiet, bone-deep shame that settles in pockets and presses on lungs. The mood in the tavern shifts too. Where once there was laughter and wagers, there is now a kind of uneasy amnesia. No one wants to talk about who bought what. Eyes glance away. Contracts are burned in fireplaces. Some people pretend they never owned a bulb at all. You know otherwise. You remember their faces, their voices, their shaky hands clutching paper with trembling joy. The collapse is not like thunder. It's like snow, slow, silent, and heavy. Homes are sold. Apprentices are let go. A painter you once knew, who made portraits of tulips for hopeful merchants, now begs on the bridge with a small box of brushes. He tells you he can paint anything, not just flowers. He's learned to do faces, even dogs. He only needs a little bread. You help when you can, but your own employer is struggling. His warehouse, once filled with spices, is half empty. He sold much of it to fund bulb investments. Now the buyers are gone, and the shelves echo with dust. You ask about your pay, and he smiles a sad, distracted smile. He says you've been loyal, and that he's grateful, but things are tight now. He offers you a bulb one of the last. A real one, not a contract. A real unsold tulip bulb in a velvet-lined box. You take it home, not because you expect it to bloom, but because it feels like the end of something. You place it on your windowsill and stare at it long after the sun sets. You remember the way people used to speak of tulips, as if they were keys to kingdoms, as if they were alive with meaning. And now, as the city leans back into routine, its tradesmen returning to fabric, cheese and fish, the tulips fade back into being flowers. Lovely, yes, but just flowers. The markets begin to stabilize. Ships still come and go. Amsterdam breathes again. But there's a weight in the air that never fully lifts. Years pass. You keep your ledgers, now filled with more mundane entries, planks, barrels, sacks of grain. You marry, perhaps? Or you walk past the old tavern now and again. It's quieter. No more auctions. No more roaring laughter. Just mugs, soup, and the occasional song from someone who's had one too many. The violin still sits in the corner. You've never learned to play? The man who gave it to you vanished one winter. Some say he returned to brewing. Others say he went to sea. You don't know. You never saw him again? And the bulb on your windowsill? It never bloomed. You never planted it. That's how Tulip Mania ended. Not with a crash, not with a fire, but with silence. With folded papers and unopened doors. And with people quietly, slowly returning to the earth, to the real, to the familiar rhythm of boats, markets, bread, and sleep. The Dutch Republic moved on. But somewhere in the walls of old buildings and the corners of dusty ledgers, the echoes of that fever still linger. Gentle, embarrassing, forgotten by many, remembered by few. Chapter 4. Banquets in a Dutch Merchant Guild Hall. The room is lit not by torches or candles alone, but by polished silver. It catches the warm orange glow of the chandeliers and reflects it in soft, dancing curves across the paneled walls. This is a merchant guild hall in Amsterdam, early in the 17th century. You are standing just beyond the heavy doors, behind a velvet curtain, watching a feast unfold, as if it were a painting come to life. Here, linen-covered tables stretch from one end of the hall to the other, each set with the deliberate symmetry of rank and tradition. The plates are pewter or porcelain, depending on status. The wine goblets are cut glass or Venetian crystal. Tall brass candlesticks anchor every table like sentries. The air is thick with roasted meat, nutmeg, and the underlying sweetness of stewed fruits. It smells like power, like money with a touch of vanity. You're not a guest. You are a scribe or perhaps a junior assistant to the guild clerk, invited only to take notes, observe etiquette, and stay silent. But from your seat in the shadows, you see everything. And you listen, always listening. The guests are men of stature, with trimmed beards and tall ruffled collars that rise like waves around their necks. Some wear dark wool coats lined with silk. Others have soft leather gloves they do not remove. These are directors of the Dutch East India Company, city officials, warehouse owners, grain importers, and art patrons. Their hands do not build. Their feet do not blister. But their signatures move ships, summon spices, and shift the price of silver in foreign lands. There's a rhythm to the evening. Courses arrive in pairs, a cold dish beside a hot one, as is proper. Smoked eel curled beside glazed duck. Steamed cabbage beside saffron rice. Pewter bowls of herring and anchovy follow a roast boar's head adorned with apples and cloves. Between courses, stewards refill goblets from polished decanters, and each toast is followed by murmurs of agreement or subtle laughter. The talk tonight is mostly about the Indies. the company has secured another contract. A fleet returns next month. Its holds heavy with pepper and cinnamon. A rumor floats about a Portuguese ship taken quietly off the coast of Java, its contents absorbed, and its flag buried. There are no objections. The men at this table see such things as business, not conquest. The world, they believe, is theirs to measure and divide. To your left, a servant sets down a platter of aged cheeses beside jars of preserved figs. He does not speak. He does not look the guests in the eye. You've seen him before. He's older than most servants, with a limp in his left leg and a burned scar across his forearm, likely from a kitchen flame. He works with perfect rhythm, his movements timed like the ticking of a merchant's clock. Outside, the city is quiet. The canals have darkened into mirrored ribbons. Snow falls softly, almost invisibly, coating the rooftops in silence. But here, inside the hall, time bends. No one is in a hurry. The merchants speak in careful tones, weighing each word as if it were currency. A single sentence can open a door or close a future. You wonder if any of them ever think of the men who loaded their ships, of the sailors who vanished into the sea with no graves but memory. A portrait hangs at the end of the hall. It shows the founders of the guild, seated around a table almost identical to the one before you now. Their faces are stern, proud, surrounded by black cloaks and white cuffs. One holds a scroll. Another gestures toward a globe. None of them smile. The past, they seem to say, was not made for levity. You take a sip of watered wine and return your attention to the head of the table. A toast is being made now, offered by the eldest merchant in the room. His voice is gravelly, worn thin by tobacco and years of shouting over warehouse floors. He raises his glass slowly, with reverence, and speaks not of profits, but of legacy, of the city, of their duty to maintain what has been built. The room grows still. Even the servants pause. You recognize the shift in mood. This is more than ceremony. This is a performance of power, rehearsed across generations. And then, almost like an exhale, the feast resumes. A lute player begins a slow melody in the corner. Not festive, exactly, but steady, gentle. The kind of tune that weaves through conversation rather than distracts from it. A woman joins him with a recorder, and their music rises like mist, clinging softly to the wood-paneled ceiling. You make note of names, of titles, of minor announcements shared between sips of brandied cordial. A new harbor being built in Batavia. A lawsuit between spice traders over a disputed shipment. A young heir who has just returned from Antwerp with grand ideas and little patience. None of it is dramatic, but all of it matters. The walls of this room contain decisions that ripple across continents. A signature here, a handshake there, and fortunes rise or fall. There is a boy at the far end of the hall, not more than 12, seated beside his father. He wears a collar far too stiff for comfort and has not touched his plate. He watches everything, your note-taking, the servers, the way the older men lean into their words. You wonder if he too is being taught to listen first, speak later. If one day, decades from now, he will sit at the head of this table and make toasts to things not yet imagined. You shift in your chair. The fire crackles low in the marble hearth. You feel the heat on your boots, though the rest of the hall remains cool. Somewhere in the back, a steward drops a plate. It clatters briefly and all heads turn for a moment. Just a moment. The plate is replaced. The conversation resumes. You realize something then. This room is not about food or music or even business. It is about control. A place where chaos is kept out, where every movement is managed, every sound considered. A sanctuary of certainty in a world that offers very little of it. The fire has burned lower now, its flames no longer reaching high, but rather flickering softly like breath. The guild hall is quieter. The courses have thinned, the servers move more slowly, and a gentle fullness settles over the men like a well-worn coat. Bellies are no longer hungry, voices are deeper, slower. Conversation meanders. The urgency of earlier trade talk has given way to memory, to stories passed down, and to remarks on the weather, the harvest, and which painter has risen too quickly in price. He glanced at the young boy again. He now rests his chin on his folded hands, his eyelids drooping with the weight of formality. He has eaten little and spoken less. His father leans over him now and whispers something in Dutch too soft to catch. The boy nods solemnly. The performance must be learned early. Across the table, a merchant scratches at his beard while recounting a voyage to Ceylon. He never made landfall himself. He sent others to trade nutmeg for textiles, but he speaks as if he stood under the palms. As if he tasted the heat, heard the drums, and smelled the cinnamon trees himself. You wonder if he believes it now, if the tale has grown more real with each retelling. That is the nature of wealth in this room. Not earned through the body, but claimed by the pen, the seal, the distant order. You shift your gaze to the steward with the limp. He now leans against the wall, a tray balanced against his hip, his shoulders sagging beneath the quiet exhaustion of invisibility. His hands are cracked from dishwater. His collar is damp with steam. No one speaks to him unless they must, but you do. Quietly, you thank him as he passes you a cloth to blot your ink. He nods without meeting your eyes, and for just a moment, you see something in him. Not bitterness, not pride, just the weight of repetition. The music has stopped. The lute rests against a chair. The woman with the recorder sits alone now, sipping from a chipped cup, her fingers still twitching as if chasing notes that have already faded. She played for hours without applause, and now she melts into the shadows like a candle finally snuffed. The head merchant clears his throat. There's still one final toast to make. The room stills once more, the performance returning to its quiet climax. He stands slowly, gripping the edge of the table for support. He thanks the guests for their loyalty, their service to the company, and their commitment to the prosperity of Amsterdam. His voice is measured, but you notice the tremble, age, fatigue, or something else. He speaks of the sea not as freedom, but as a necessary danger. Of the Indies not as paradise, but as a battleground of interest. Of the need for men of steadiness, vision, and restraint. His words drift outward like smoke, dense and warm. Around you, the other guests nod, not enthusiastically, not even solemnly. Just the way one nods at gravity, at something unchanging. The toast ends, glasses rise. Some sip, some simply hold the cup to their lips, and then set it down again. You can feel the evening begin to slide toward its end. Chairs creak as men lean back. A few talk of business still to be done tomorrow. One mentions a daughter to marry. Another worries over the state of the Baltic grain routes. You wonder what they'll remember about tonight. Not the food, not the speeches. Likely not even each other. Perhaps just a vague impression of warmth, of being seen, of their names whispered with reverence in corridors beyond this one. The boy has fallen asleep. His father allows it now. He drapes his coat across the boy's shoulders and continues his conversation. His voice low, as if discussing ships while balancing a future on his shoulder. Your own work is nearly done. The ledger beside you is filled with neat lines of observation names, exchanges, remarks, and the time the final toast was given. You'll file it away later in the guild's archive, where it will sleep beside hundreds of others like it. The men in those pages will fade. Their fortunes may rise or vanish. But the guild hall endures. As the guests begin to depart, their footsteps echo on the wooden floor, softened by the dimming firelight. The room empties slowly, not because anyone wants to stay, but because no one wants to be first to leave. That, too, is a form of performance. The servants clear the tables. Bones are scraped from plates. Wax is peeled from silver holders. Wine stains are dabbed from tablecloths that will be boiled and pressed again. The woman with the recorder packs her instrument and slips out the side door. The steward with the limp extinguishes the last wall sconce, then disappears down the servant's stair. You are the last to leave. You linger a moment longer than necessary, letting your eyes travel across the long table, now bare and still. The portrait at the far wall watches as always, silent, framed, unblinking. Outside, snow still falls in delicate flurries. You step into it, pulling your coat tight, your breath rising in pale clouds. The canal beside the hall reflects the lamp glow in scattered lines. A gondola passes slowly, pushed along by an oarsman bundled against the cold. Somewhere behind a curtain, a woman hums. Somewhere in the dark, a child cries. The wealth of the Dutch Republic lies not in its coins or contracts, but in its confidence, in its belief that structure and order can hold chaos at bay. And for a night inside that banquet hall, it almost seems true. But now, as you walk home alone, you know better. The plates have been cleared. The names will fade. And the silence of snow is the only sound that remembers everything. Chapter 5. Storms and Ice. Sailing through the Arctic. It begins in spring, though you'd hardly know it. The harbor in Amsterdam is choked with mist, and the scent of fish oil and damp rope clings to the air. You are a part of the crew. You sleep on rough boards, eat beside men who haven't washed in weeks, and follow orders shouted from the quarterdeck whether day or night. The breath of 20 men hangs in the air like fog. You wrap yourself in wool, pull your cap low, and try to forget the damp under your spine. Every creak in the hull feels like a whisper of something wrong. The captain stands at the bow with a long glass, searching for signs of whales or, worse, icebergs. His coat is fur-lined, his eyes sunken from little sleep. He does not speak often. The water is black, the air sharper than glass. You row with a dozen others. The harpoons are ready. No one speaks. A harpoon sinks deep into one of the giants, and it thrashes, sending icy spray over the boat. You grip the gunwale with white knuckles. The rope screams through the block, burning against the wood. The whale dives. The boat is nearly dragged under. But it holds. You can hear the whale's now low, mournful exhalations from creatures that move like drifting stones. When he does, it's to give brief commands. He trusts the sea no more than you do. The men around you mutter to themselves. One begins to hum a hymn. Another vomits quietly into a bucket. You are sent to help rescue it. The water down there is ankle deep and bitingly cold. Your feet go numb, but you say nothing. The lamps swing in wide arcs, throwing your shadows like ghosts across the bulkhead. You listen to the sea slap and hiss, and wonder how close the ice is. Every shiver reminds you that soon the real cold will begin. The blubber is stripped and rendered into oil, poured hot into barrels that will be stored below. You tighten the lines with fingers that barely respond. Then the waves arrive. Not high at first, but angry. White-lipped, uneven, lashing at the hull with a steady rhythm like a hand knocking on a door. The deck turns slick and dangerous. Your coat is soaked. Your body aches. The air reeks of burnt fat and salt and smoke. You scramble up the ladder and emerge onto the deck. The sea has changed again. It is crowded now, dotted with white spires and dark shapes that bob and breathe. The lookout calls down from the mast. A pod of bowhead whales is nearby. The ship rocks steadily beneath you. It groans as it cuts into the dark water. The rigging sings with every gust of wind. Around you, men load barrels of salted pork, biscuit bread, and whale oil casks into the hold of a tall, sturdy ship. The occasional glimpse of a bird tracing spirals in the sky. Meals are served twice daily, mostly dried peas, hard bread, and salted meat that clings to the teeth like twine. Just the sound of chewing, the clink of spoons against bowls, and the moan of timbers adjusting to the temperature drop. If you're lucky, you find no worms. If you're lucky, the biscuits stay dry. Its name is painted in black along the stern, flanked by the red, white, blue of the Republic's flag. This is not a trading vessel headed for the Indies. This is a whaler, and it is bound for the cold edge of the known world, the icy seas north of Norway, beyond Iceland, past the archipelago of Svalbard. You are not a merchant or an officer this time. The journey north is long and uneventful at first. For days, you see only water, the color of lead, the smell of salt. Sleep comes in snatches. The hold is cold and close. And then it does. As the ship crosses into the Arctic waters, the light changes. Days stretch into endless twilight. The sun dips but does not vanish. The sky stays bruised, caught between night and day. Your hands begin to crack. Your breath becomes visible. Ice forms along the edge of the deck and lacy spiderwebs. The sails stiffen. The sea, once restless, now feels heavy, as though the ship drags through slush rather than water. There is no land in sight. Only floating plates of sea ice, some as small as barrels, others as wide as fields. One morning you are shaken awake by a sharp voice and the muffled sound of boots above. The men leap into action. The boats are lowered with groaning pulleys. You climb in, your hands already numb. When the strike comes, it is sudden. A lurch. A shout. After hours of battle, the creature is subdued. The work begins. Long knives. Hooked chains, boiling pots. You eat that night in silence. No one speaks of the whale. No one speaks at all. And that night, the storm begins. It starts with a whisper and edge to the wind, a strange color in the sky. The captain orders sails drawn. You lie in your bunk as the ship lurches. Sleep is impossible. By morning, the ship is still afloat, but the sails are torn. One mast creaks ominously. A barrel has burst in the hold. There's no room for weakness here. Not this far north. The storm passes, but it doesn't leave. It lingers in the bones of the ship and every nail loosened, every plank swollen with cold brine. The air afterward feels hollow. Quiet, but not peaceful. When the lookout cries out, you feel both dread and duty. By now, your fingers know the oar's texture without needing light. The water is still as glass but deceiving. Beneath the surface, currents pull and curl like ropes around ankles. The whale appears just ahead, a massive form, barnacled and calm, its eye glinting in the pale sun. The sea becomes solid around you, slow at first, then suddenly. Of ovens and wool and summers so warm the canals dried at the edges. You try not to speak of home. No one wants to remember too much. It makes the cold sharper, loneliness heavier. Ice forms in long sheets, encircling the hull. A man taps it with an oar, and the sound it makes is hollow, like knocking on the inside of a coffin. The captain orders the crew to take axes and break the ice before it locks the ship in place. You work by moonlight, the blade dull in your hands, chipping at the sea itself like it's a wall trying to trap you. Another whale has surfaced near a break in the ice, and you are chosen for the hunt. Navigation becomes guesswork. You listen for the crunch of ice, the groan of the hull. Sleep comes harder. The rats below deck grow bolder. You step off the gangplank and feel cobblestone beneath your boots again. But your body moves differently now. Your knees ache, your shoulders are stiff. It's dark, but not cold. You watch the way it ripples beneath the wind. Not the sound of your own breath rising in the dark while ice closed in on all sides. You wonder how long it will take before you forget the way the Arctic looked. Or if you ever will. Your skin has not stopped itching since the northern wind first touched it. One gnaws at your boot laces as you doze. You kick it away without waking fully. It's enough to last a few weeks if you spend carefully. You pass by a shop selling boots made of soft new leather. You pause, but instead of buying, you keep walking. The idea of comfort feels strange. You emerge from the hold with the others to assess the damage. The captain confirms it with a spyglass. The Norwegian coast, the southern edge of the Arctic. His ears are black. Frostbite has set in. There's no doctor. No medicines, only cloth and old sailor tricks. They warm him near the cooking fire. He wants to begin the return journey before the ship is swallowed completely. You can see the relief in the crew, even those who hide it. Men begin to speak of home again, cautiously. Of wives or rooms above taverns or favorite boots left near the fire. Someone gives him their coat. The next morning he's still breathing, but barely. The crew hauls it piece by piece, each section stripped and boiled. The deck becomes a factory of flame and fat. The air is heavy with smoke and stench. Your skin burns from the heat, your nose burns from the cold. The contradiction is constant. You are never entirely dry, never entirely clean, never entirely warm. You're not home yet, but you're heading south. Toward green things, toward nights that grow dark again, toward warmth. Sails hang in tatters, tangled like torn parchment. Ice clings to the railings in hard, unnatural shapes. The way the men cheer with hoarse voices that have grown too used to pain. You steady the boat while they work, your face expressionless, your stomach steady. You do not allow yourself to think of the whale as anything but oil. You cannot afford to. One of the small whale boats is gone entirely, torn loose and claimed by the dark. No one saw it happen. Or if they did, no one says a word. The captain stands at the prow again. He doesn't speak. His hands are wrapped in wool, and he scans the horizon with tired eyes. You begin to wonder how long this voyage is meant to last. Time here is not measured in days. It is measured in meals, in shifts, in how long you can keep your feet from going numb. Soon, the work resumes. There is always more to do. More whales to chase, more barrels to fill. The rowboat is lowered again, and you step into it without hesitation. The harpoon strikes, it never stops feeling wrong. The way the beast thrashes, the sound it makes. Back on board, the carcass is tied alongside the ship. One night, the wind dies completely. The ship stops moving. Your breath comes in clouds now. Your beard freezes to your collar. You dream of heat. A man collapses during the night shift. His hands are purple. The captain decides to change course. The ice is thickening. The whales are fewer, but the way back is no less cruel. A fog sets in, thick and blinding. You can no longer see the horizon. The world is a dim circle of gray, and then land. A streak of white too stable to be cloud, a shape that does not move. The men do not cheer. They exhale, slowly, as though holding that breath had become a habit. When you finally dock in Amsterdam weeks later, the city is bright with spring. Children run barefoot. Bakers shout from open windows. You receive your pay-some coins and a small bonus in oil shares. Later, you sit by the canal with a mug of beer and stare into the water. The journey is over. But the sea never leaves you completely. Not its silence. Not its weight. Chapter 6. Life in the Spice Islands. Banda's tragic harvest. The air in Banda is thick, almost sweet. It clings to your skin with a weight that isn't entirely uncomfortable, but it never lifts. From the shore, you see coconut palms sway gently against a sky too blue to seem real. The sea around the island is shallow and clear, a pane of glass hiding reefs below. And all across the hills and valleys of this tiny land, the scent of nutmeg drifts like smoke. You are standing at the edge of a plantation. The trees grow in clusters, their leaves wide and heavy. Beneath them, the nutmeg fruit swells in the warm shade small. Yellow pods that split when ripe to reveal the red lace of mace curled around the dark seed within. It is a beautiful crop, fragrant, colorful, valuable beyond imagination. The Dutch arrived here for that reason. Not for gold or for souls or for land, but for spice. In the early 1600s, nutmeg was worth more than silver. It flavored medicine, preserved meats, and laced wine in the halls of Europe's elite. And Banda was the only place on earth where it grew naturally. A tiny archipelago holding a monopoly over a European obsession. You walk the rows of trees and feel the heat building beneath your collar. Laborers move silently through the grove. Some are natives of Banda, their faces tight with memory. Others were brought here by force captured or purchased, ferried across seas, and set to work in a place they will never leave. You see them harvesting with simple tools, hooked poles, baskets, cloth wraps tied at the waist. Their motions are practiced, efficient, tired. Overhead, a Dutch overseer watches from horseback, his hat broad, his coat too warm for the climate. He does not speak to the workers. He writes something in a small leather book and tugs at his gloves as if cleanliness could protect him from the land's history. The Banda Islands were once ruled by local chiefs who traded freely with the Portuguese, the English, and the Dutch. They had spice and they had power, but they did not wish to sign exclusive contracts. They refused the Dutch monopoly, and that refusal, in the end, became their undoing. In 1621, Jan Pieterszoon Cohen, Governor General of the Dutch East Indies, arrived with ships and soldiers. His aim was simple: to seize total control of the nutmeg trade, to make Banda submit, and if it would not, to erase it. You pass through a clearing where nothing grows anymore. Just scorched grass and stones. This, they say, was once a village. There are no plaques, no markers, only the emptiness speaks. During Cohen's campaign, The Dutch massacred or exiled nearly the entire population of Banda, thousands of people killed in the space of days, their homes burned, their leaders executed or drowned. Survivors fled to the mountains or were taken as slaves. Entire communities vanished. You do not see that violence here now. It's been decades, but you feel its echo. The silence beneath the trees. The way some workers avert their eyes when the Dutch officer passes. The lack of children. Near the edge of the grove stands a small warehouse built of stone and timber, where the nutmeg is dried and sorted. Inside, the heat becomes stifling. Racks of fruit rest on slatted shelves. The scent here is overwhelming, earthy, peppery, almost floral. You help lift a basket, and the dust clings to your arms like smoke. No one speaks. They just work. Back outside, you follow a track toward the port. The harbor is small but busy. Ships bob gently, their hulls heavy with spice. Sailors pull ropes and patch sails, their voices rising in Dutch, Malay, Portuguese, and tongues you cannot name. Nutmeg sacks are hoisted one by one. A ledger is signed. A guard checks a seal. This is not a trading post anymore. It is an engine. A factory island designed to supply Europe with flavor while draining the life from those who harvest it. The Dutch call it efficiency. They call it order. But those who live here call it something else. If they speak at all, the sun sinks slowly behind the ridge. The trees cast long shadows across the plantation. Workers begin to return to the barracks, their feet dragging slightly across the packed dirt paths. Some speak quietly to each other in low voices. Others remain silent, their faces set in practiced stillness. The Dutch discourage families. Workers are easier to manage when they are isolated. Easier still when their native customs and languages have been blurred, erased, or replaced. One man hums a lullaby in a tongue you don't recognize. The sky overhead is so dark it feels endless, with stars scattered like grains across black silk. A guard sits there in a rattan chair, musket across his lap. He nods as you pass but doesn't speak. The gun isn't meant to protect against invaders. It's meant for the workers, in case they rise, in case they remember. You walk past nutmeg trees now lit only by moonlight, their fruit glowing faintly gold in the branches. The orang kaya, the village elders, the traders who spoke many languages and welcomed ships from every flag. They are gone now. Their names survive only in scattered stories, and in the minds of the few who lived through it. Some were executed by the Dutch, others were exiled, others simply disappeared, swallowed by the sea or the jungle. He sings not for a child, but to himself, his back against the wall, his eyes closed. But the soil remembers. The land beneath the groves is thick with ash and silence. You follow them for a time, listening to the rustle of cloth, the rhythmic creak of rope, slings carrying tools, the soft scuff of tired footsteps. Through the shutters, you can see the edge of the plantation glowing in the moonlight. Somewhere in the distance, someone is still singing, the words soft and foreign, the melody simple, just as it has been for years, just as it will be for many more. The barrels will be filled, the papers signed, and the ships loaded. The ports in Amsterdam and London will receive their fragrant cargo. The nobles will drink their mulled wine. The merchants will stir their sauces. And few will ever wonder where it came from or who bent in the heat to bring it to them. The day is ending, but there is no relief. Only routine. The barracks are built low and wide, made of timber and roofed in thatch. It will stay with you long after you leave Banda, if you leave. And even if the world forgets, even if maps are redrawn and flags replaced, the truth will still live here, beneath the trees, in the roots and the air. Inside, the heat from the day lingers, trapped in the wood and walls. Men and women sit on narrow mats, stretching out their arms, rubbing swollen ankles. The Dutch overseer resides in a sturdy villa overlooking the grove. He speaks with a clipped accent, his voice precise. He doesn't ask about the workers. He asks only whether the next harvest will meet the quota. You write what he says, sign your name, and leave the room without comment. A wraparound porch frames its front, and white curtains billow from windows trimmed with dark wood. The house is lit with oil lamps, their glow spilling gently onto the floorboards. You're invited inside just briefly to record a few lines in the plantation book. Shipments, labor rosters, expenses. Some prepare food over small fires. Rice boiled with dried fish. Herbs gathered from the edge of the plantation. No one has much. The portions are meager, the ingredients bland, but there is comfort in habit, in the repetition of quiet evenings where nothing new is taken away. Children are rare here. Most were lost in the early years, and few are born now. You leave them there, stepping back toward the path that leads up to the main house. The overseer is polite, but his eyes are cold. Outside, the night has taken full hold. The air cools, but only slightly. Insects begin their chorus, soft and constant. There's a watch post near the edge of the plantation. You think of the men who once ruled these islands. In the years since the conquest, the Dutch have planted new trees, new rules, and new people. They call this progress. The nutmeg will be harvested again in the morning. You return to your quarters, a small wooden room beside the warehouse. The floor creaks, the mattress is thin. You lie down and listen. The scent of spice lingers in your clothes, in your hair, in your very breath. This island is paradise, some say. But they do not sleep on its soil. They do not harvest in its heat. They do not remember its silence. They only taste the spice. Chapter 7. The Floating World of a Canal Merchant. The day begins before the sun finds the surface of the water. The mist rolls low along the canal, thick and gray, turning chimneys into ghostly spires and rooftops into faded shapes. Your boat sits moored just below a wooden loading dock, swaying gently in the current. Its hull is worn smooth by years of scraping against damp brick and dock pylons. You know every creak in its frame, every nail that holds it together. You are a canal merchant, not a great captain sailing across oceans, not a warehouse magnate with clerks and ledgers. You're something smaller, quieter, one of thousands of middlemen who stitch Amsterdam together each day, ferrying goods from warehouse to house, from quay to market stall. Your cargo changes daily, sometimes cloth, sometimes cheese. Today, it's peat blocks, dark, dense bundles of compressed soil, used for heating homes and bakeries all over the city. You wipe the dew from the gunwale and untie the rope with practiced hands. The wood is cold beneath your fingers, damp from the night. You step aboard and push away from the dock with a long pole, guiding your boat slowly into the main canal. The current here is lazy, but steady. The water is dark, tinged green, its surface broken only by the faint ripple of ducks, the occasional bubble, or the trailing shape of another barge ahead. The houses on either side lean forward slightly, their tall gables watching over the canal like old men listening to a story. Shutters are still closed, laundry lines hang limp. Chimney smoke begins to rise in slow, uncertain curls. It is the beginning of another ordinary day. You stand at the tiller and guide the boat beneath a low bridge. The arch of stone is slick with moss, the underside marked with soot and the scrawl of passing time. The smell here is layered fish oil, wet rope, faint tobacco, and something sour that always clings near the tannery. You know the route by heart. Turn left at the church tower. Drift slowly near the spice market. Watch for the black and red shutters that mark your buyer's house. There is no schedule, not really, but punctuality is noticed. So is lateness. Your customer this morning is a baker's wife who burns too much peat in her oven and always claims she ordered less than she did. You won't argue. You'll note it in your own book and make it up on the next trip. That's how it works. Quiet, unspoken negotiations stacked like the bricks of this city, layer by layer, leaning slightly under the weight of compromise. As you unload the blocks onto her small dock, she steps out, arms folded against the cold. She nods at you and says nothing about the extra weight. You nod back. Coins pass from her hand to yours, wrapped in a cloth to keep them dry. You tuck them into your coat and step back onto your boat. It's not glamorous work. You're not building cathedrals or changing the world, but you keep the city warm. You keep it fed. You make it possible for the rich to feel important, and for the poor to keep their fires lit, and all from the deck of a boat that no one will ever paint, that no poet will ever praise. Later in the morning, the city awakens in full. The canal becomes busier, A brewer's barge floats by, barrels strapped tight. A florist rows with careful hands, vases clinking behind her. A pair of children wave from the window of a second-floor room. You wave back and continue on. At your next stop, a fishmonger argues with his apprentice over the weight of a cod. You tie up, wait patiently, then unload 2 sacks of coarse salt. He pays you in coin and gossip, says there's a shortage coming, says the boats from the North Sea are delayed, says the guild will raise prices again. You nod as if surprised. You're not. The day continues like this, slowly, steadily. You take deliveries across town. You eat your midday meal on the boat, a crust of bread, a bit of cheese, and a flask of warm beer. You sit near a willow tree, watching the light shift across the canal, turning green into gold, gold into gray. The world smells different now. The bakeries have started their fires. The smoke carries sediment, flour, burnt crust. You feel the ache in your back. It comes earlier now. Years ago, it wouldn't set in until evening. But you've been doing this too long to pretend. The boat is lower in the water than it once was. So are you. Still, the rhythm's comforting. The city flows around you. Its bridges rise and fall like a silent heartbeat. Its windows blink open, then close again. Its bells ring not for you, but you still listen. And beneath your feet, the wood of the boat responds to the water like a second pulse, steady, measured, patient. As the sun begins to dip behind the chimneys and the canal water turns the color of pewter, you make your final deliveries. A row of cheese wheels to a vendor near the fish gate. A bundle of cloth to a seamstress who always insists on inspecting every corner for damp. Your shoulders ache. The sleeves of your coat are lined with salt and silt. You tug your cap down tighter as the wind picks up across the canal. You stop briefly by the weighing house, hoping to avoid the tax clerk. He recognizes your boat, always asks too many questions about load sizes. You keep your head down and glide beneath the overhang, moving along the narrow waterway like a shadow. You've learned how to disappear when needed. It's not dishonesty. It's survival. Not all merchants can afford mistakes. The grand traders who own warehouses on the Prinz and Grek can lose a ship and still dine well. But you lose one barrel to spallage, one customer to another barge, and it means bread gets thinner for a week. You have no staff, no clerk, no cushion. Only memory and instinct and a little book in your pocket with names and numbers that shift like tides. Back at your mooring, you tie off the boat and begin unloading what's left. A few empty sacks. A broken crate you'll need to repair tomorrow. The ropes are stiff with cold. Your hands move slower now. You once could work through twilight without noticing the dark. Now the shadows feel heavier. You check the lantern mounted to the bow. The wick is low, the oil almost gone. You make a note to refill it. There are fines now for sailing without light, even for someone like you. Up the dock and down a narrow alley, you reach your home a single-room flat above a cooper's workshop. The stairs creak with your weight. The floorboards bend under your boots. The room is simple. A table, a small hearth, a bed against the wall with blankets that smell faintly of ash. You place your ledger on the table, set the coins beside it, and sit down slowly. Your knees pop, your shoulders sink. You take stock. Today was fair. Not good, not bad. Enough to meet what you owe the wood seller, but not enough to pay off last month's salt purchase in full. You'll pay half. Hope the rest can wait. Hope you're not the only one behind this week. You heat water on the hearth, steam rising from the dented kettle. The scent of damp wool fills the room. You pull off your boots and rub your feet, then unwrap your dinner, a heel of brown bread, a wedge of old cheese, a handful of dried apple. You chew slowly, staring at the candle burning low beside your ledger. The flame flickers with every gust that squeezes through the shuttered window. You think of the merchant guild, of the banquets they hold in great halls with silver and song. You are not part of that world. You pass by it. You serve it. But you are not invited to it. Still, you know the city in a way they never will. You know which docks crack in the cold, which bridges groan just before they fail, which markets are honest, which are not. Your city is not the one on the maps. Your city is made of currents, timing, and the names of people who never sign contracts but keep their word anyway. Later, as the fire fades, you lie in bed and listen to the sounds of Amsterdam settling for the night. A wheelbarrow creaks down the alley. A cat yowls once and then falls silent. Somewhere, bells chime softly from a nearby church tower. Not the hour bell, the smaller one. The one that tolls only when someone passes. You think briefly of the men who didn't return from the Arctic? Or the ones who never made it back from the Indies? Their stories are told loudly, with drama and flair. Yours is not. You are no adventurer, no hero, just a man with a boat, a ledger, and 1,000 quiet mornings behind him. But without you, the city stumbles, the ovens go cold. The cellars stay empty. The trades don't reach the street. You drift into sleep thinking of the water, its smell, its sounds, the way it moves beneath you when you stand still. You dream, sometimes, that the canals rise too high, flooding the houses, washing away the fine hulls and sharp suits, leaving only those who knew how to float. But the city always holds. And in the morning, you'll be back on the boat, one hand on the tiller, one eye on the sky, waiting for the wind to turn. Chapter 8. Inside a Dutch mapmaker's studio. The door opens with a groan, and you step into a room filled with paper and silence. The studio is small, tucked above a print shop near the single canal. Its walls are lined with scrolls and stacked folios, their edges yellowed with age and dusted with the fine grit of charcoal. He does not greet you. He simply nods toward the waiting parchment. You hang your coat on a peg, roll up your sleeves, and take your place at the second desk. The fire is low, the windows fogged, your breath clouds the glass. But soon your fingers warm from the steady rhythm of tracing coastlines. A high desk sits near the window, angled toward the morning light. Ink pots rest in a row like soldiers. Quills, some sharpened to a fine point and others dulled from use, lie beside them. A man arrived last night with drawings made along the coast of New Guinea. The lines are rough, made aboard a swaying ship, but something about them feels new. The master lays the sketch flat. You study it closely. The island seems like a dragon's jaw-sharp bays, narrow ridges, a mouth wide open to the sea. This is where you work, where the world becomes flat and measurable, where imagination is pressed into lines. You are an apprentice cartographer. There's a jar labeled Spitzbergen, though it holds only water and a few grains of ice melt from a whaling ship. These are the places you know, not through memory, but through color, texture, the rhythm of their names on your tongue. River of the South Wind, River of the Lost Sail, names that sound old and certain, though they are little more than poetry. On the edge of the world, imagination fills the gaps where certainty cannot go. The room glows gold, and the ink shimmers slightly on the fresh sheets. You stretch your back, roll your shoulders, and flex your aching fingers. The next day you'll label a port that may not exist. In time, your work will be copied, printed, carried across oceans, and nailed to tavern walls. Men will follow your lines into storm. Some will return. Some won't. And none of them will know that the map they trusted was once shaped by your hand, by candlelight, in a room that smelled of ink and patience. The master places a hand on your work. He does not smile, but he leaves it there a moment longer than necessary. The master has already arrived. He sits at his table beneath a wide-brimmed hat, glasses perched low on his nose. A merchant looks at a coastline and sees profit. A soldier sees danger. A prince sees power, but a mapmaker? A mapmaker sees what might be, what should be, what someone far away hopes they will find. You begin with the western edge of Africa, the part already drawn. You're not inventing. You're copying carefully, patiently, from a faded map made 20 years earlier. A dog barks once, then disappears down an alley. You stand at the window and look out, your hands stained with ink, your breath fogging the glass. The city is shrinking in the darkness, but the world in your head is expanding. But as your hand moves along the paper, the line changes slightly. A curve where there was once a corner. A notch in the shore that wasn't marked before. That's the strange power of your trade. Maps are meant to be factual, precise. But in truth, they lie a little with every line. A sailor miscounts the stars. A trader remembers the inlet too-eyed. An explorer draws what he thinks he saw through the fog. And so the map changes. You dip your quill in ink and blow gently to keep the tip from flooding. The lines must be fine, exact, clean. A single blot ruins the page. You've done that before. Once. The master did not shout. He simply set the ruined map aside and handed you another sheet. Start again, he said. Mistakes don't exist on maps. Only revisions. Behind you, a cabinet holds samples of strange sand from distant beaches, coarse yellow from Ceylon, fine black from Suriname, pale red from the Cape. Around midday, the master speaks. He asks if you've seen the latest sketch from Batavia. He asks what you see. You hesitate, then answer. Possibility. He nods. In the afternoon, your task shifts. You begin labeling rivers. Some have names. Others don't. For those, the master chooses Latin phrases. You begin to realize that maps are not records. They are arguments, suggestions, promises wrapped in the illusion of fact. The light fades. You light the lanterns, adjusting the glass chimneys, so the flames burn low and steady. Outside, the church bells mark the hour. The street below is quiet now. A boy whistles. A woman sweeps her doorstep. Tomorrow you will add a mountain range drawn from memory by a sea captain who never climbed it. The lantern burns low as you return to your desk, sleeves rolled and fingers steady. The master has retired for the evening, his coat still hanging behind the door, his boots drying by the fire. You remain, carefully sketching a coastline drawn from a ship's log passed to you only an hour ago. The journal was written by a tired sailor with poor Latin and worse penmanship. But within its smudged lines is the suggestion of a new shore, unnamed, unclaimed, a crescent of land rising from the fog. Seen once at dawn, then gone by midday, you trace waves with short, curved lines. You add hatching to indicate elevation. You sketch forests as clusters of soft cones. Every line is a decision. Every absence of detail is deliberate. You run your fingers along the edge of an atlas, bound in worn leather. Inside are maps drawn before you were born. Many are wrong, now rivers misplaced, borders changed, nations gone. But they're not failures, they're moments. Each one captured how someone once saw the world, and that too has value. Sometimes not knowing is the most honest thing a map can show. The client for this map is a merchant who plans to open a new trade route between the Baltic and the Rhine. A small chart requested by a bookseller in Leiden. A decorative piece for the margin of an atlas. He wants a compass rose, 4 winds, a sun in the corner. The fire has almost gone out. You pull on your coat and wrap your scarf tight. Your breath fogs as you blow out the lantern. The canal reflects the moon. A dog trots past with a bone in its mouth. You pass a bakery, closed now, but still warm with the memory of heat. Nothing fancy, he said, but elegant. You oblige. What stories, though, return with, if they return at all? You add scrollwork, delicate and balanced. A small face in the center, wind cheeks puffed, eyes wide, stylized but familiar. Like the sea itself, always watching. He will never travel the route himself. He will send others men who will carry his goods along the borders you draw now. Your lines will be their reality. The Banda Islands. You know what happened there. You drew those maps too. You labeled them, planted flags with ink, drew neat boxes around places where thousands disappeared. The power of your pen feels heavier now. You never held a sword, never shouted orders on a burning dock, but you gave shape to the places where others did. You marked a spot on your map with dotted lines and a soft curve. You give it no name, not yet. But it sits there now, whispering to those who will see it later. Another world, waiting. You walk over to it and rest your fingers on its surface. The equator is faded. The poles are blank. A whole hemisphere is still more suggestion than certainty. Names shift every few years. Some are written in Latin, some in Dutch. Some in a jumble of syllables borrowed from foreign tongues and mispronounced into permanence. Beside you lies a bestiary of sea creatures, hand-illustrated, colored with pigment made from crushed beetles, chalk, and ground lapis. A leviathan, mouth open, teeth sharp but stylized. not to frighten, but to signal. Here's where the known ends. Here be questions, not answers. Some creatures, whales, rays, porpoises. Others are stranger, serpents with mamies. Behind you, a draft stirs the edge of a scroll, and for a moment it curls like a waking thing. The studio creaks gently around you, floorboards settling, shutters flexing, the low pop of embers in the hearth. Outside, the city sleeps. But inside this room, centuries turn in silence. Fish with horns, turtles the size of barges. They're not placed randomly. Where the maps grow sparse, where oceans stretch wide and empty, that's where the monsters live. Not as superstition, but as markers of fear and awe, as warnings, perhaps, or invitations. You begin inking one now just offshore from a jagged headland. The work is slow, but meditative. You pause to sip water from a chipped mug, your throat dry from the dust of parchment. You stand and stretch your back stiff from hours at the desk. You return to your work and begin shading the northern provinces, but you wonder what they will see that you haven't marked. In the corner of the room stands a globe, tilted slightly off its axis from too many hands spinning it with careless wonder. You turn the globe slowly and stop at the Indies. You sit again, your candle burning low. One last task remains. With careful lines, you draw the points, north, east, south, west. Then you curl the letters in an ornate hand. The clock chimes once. Midnight. You cap your inkwell, blot the last of the lines, and set the parchment on the drying rack. Down the stair and out into the night, the city greets you with cobbled quiet. You walk home slowly, knowing the lines you drew tonight will travel farther than you ever will. You do not claim the world. You only map its edges. And in doing so, you leave your name in places you'll never see. Chapter 9. Enslaved in the Dutch Colonies. The sun rises differently here. Not with the gentle gold of European mornings, but with a sudden blaze thick and weighty, as if the sky itself has opened. In the colony of Suriname, the day begins in sweat. The jungle does not sleep. It only quiets, briefly, between the hours of midnight and dawn. But by first light, the insects sing again, the birds cry out in sharp, sudden notes, and the heat presses in like a blanket soaked in steam. You are one of hundreds, a body in a row of bodies. The bell has not yet rung, but already your eyes are open. There's no need for clocks. The rhythm of this place lives in your bones. You sleep on a straw mat in a wooden barracks that smells of mold and old fire. The walls are made of split logs. The roof leaks in storms. When it rains here, it rains like the sky is falling apart. You rise without speaking. Beside you, others stir, men, women, children, all dressed in rough cotton, all barefoot. You splash water from a basin across your face. It's not cold, not refreshing, just wet. You eat a handful of cornmeal porridge, if any remains. A child coughs beside the hearth. Another cries. No one soothes them. There's no time. The bell rings. It is not a large bell, not grand or ceremonial. It hangs crooked from a post near the overseer's hut, and when it clangs, it sounds like a pan struck with a spoon. But it rules everything. It signals when you move, when you work, when you stop. You do not decide. You walk the path to the fields, the earth beneath your feet dry at first, then soft with swamp. The plantation is vast. Rows of sugarcane stretch farther than you can see, taller than you. Green stalks, sharp-edged and heavy with sweet. You carry a blade, not yours, not by choice. A Dutchman hands it to you each morning and takes it back each night. The work is simple. Cut, strip, carry, over and over. Each stalk sliced low at the root. Each load carried in bundles tied with rope or cloth. The sun climbs as you do this, and by midday the sweat runs down your back like rain. Your hands blister, your arms ache. The cane slices your fingers. Thin paper cuts that stain for hours. There is no pause, not unless the bell rings again. And it does not ring often. You do not speak unless spoken to. The overseers walk the rows, Dutchmen in tall hats with long sticks. They speak in harsh syllables. Sometimes they speak to you. More often they speak about you trading complaints like coins. They do not know your name, only your number, or your nickname, given without kindness, but you remember your name. You carry it inside you like an ember. You do not speak it aloud, not anymore, but it burns there all the same. At midday, a brief rest. Not in the shade, there's little shade in the fields, but on the ground where you sit. Legs folded beneath you, arms resting on your knees. A bowl of cassava mash is passed down the line. You eat quickly, carefully. No second helpings, no talk of hunger. Only the moment, then up again, the bell calling once more. By late afternoon, the sky changes. It dims slightly, turning brass at the edges. The birds go quiet again. The air grows thicker, if that's possible. You feel it pressing behind your eyes. Still, the blade moves. Still, the cane falls. A man beside you stumbles. The overseer does not stop. The man is pulled up. The work continues. There is no room for weakness. You think of water, not the muddy trickle from the pump, but cool, fresh water. River water, rainwater, the kind you drank long ago, before ships and chains and sugar. You don't remember how it tasted exactly, but you remember the sound, the music of it. The bell rings again. This time it signals return. The march back to the barracks is slow, but it is not rest. It is simply another part of the cycle. The blade is returned. The cane left behind in heaps to be boiled into sugar or rum or molasses, sweet things that will never touch your tongue. You do not watch the factory smoke rise. You've seen it too many times. You know what it costs. A few speak in their mother tongues, fragments of speech kept alive in secret. Others hum while cooking, the same songs repeated every night like prayer. A woman near the corner of the barracks begins plaiting her daughter's hair, her fingers gentle despite the girl's sunburned scalp. He doesn't promise deliverance, only comfort. He speaks of rivers and ancestors, of freedom not as a place, but as a truth carried quietly. Some nod, some close their eyes, some continue with their chores. You step out briefly into the night air. The plantation is quiet now, but it is known, a burial place. You visit it once a week. Not tonight, but soon. You do not speak the names aloud. The names are carried inside you. To speak them would be to give them away. No bell, no boots. Just the rustle of sugar cane in the breeze and the distant crack of palm fronds against one another. You breathe. You stretch. You do not smile. But you do not bow either. She speaks to her softly, not of dreams, but of staying still, of staying quiet, of staying safe. Your body is stiff. Another field to clear. You do not welcome it, but you meet it. Your back settles into the straw. The body remembers where it hurts, even when the mind tries not to. You listen. A man snores, a child coughs, as if sugar grows itself, as if the sweetness on a noble's tongue comes without a price. But it does come. Eventually. Some nights you dream of water. A wide river, cool and green. No ships, no voices. Just you and the current. Floating. A woman prays in a language the overseers never bothered to learn. You don't understand all the words, but the sound is enough. A bowl of beans, salted fish, and rice. If there is rice tonight, you chew with care. You stretch your legs only when no one needs the space. Someone nearby is sewing a tear in a shirt, threading bone needle through worn fabric by candlelight. The thread is too thick, the fabric too thin, but it holds. Your skin is raw in the places where cloth rubs too long. The path underfoot is darker now, slick with evening dew and lined with insects that hum and click as the air cools. You reach the barracks as the last color bleeds from the sky. A gecko climbs the post beside you. A rat scurries near the hearth. You do not flinch. These things belong here as much as you do. Inside, the heat lingers, but the noise grows. Voices return. Not loud, not joyful, but human. You eat slowly, knees drawn close, your back against the wall. Overhead, the rafters creak with the weight of years. Later, the preacher speaks. Not a Dutchman, one of your own. Not ordained by any church, but known by the people. His words are slow, gentle. There are no pages in this sermon. No candles raised. But there is meaning, and it passes from mouth to ear like a stolen ember kept alive in secret. Outside, the stars return sharp and bright against the blackness. Behind the barracks, in a narrow space no one patrols after dark, there's a small patch of cleared earth. It is not marked. Back in your corner, you lie on the mat again. Sleep comes slowly. It must sneak in past the ache, the noise, the fear. Other nights, you don't dream at all. You wake before the bell always. The darkness is still thick. You do not move yet. Just breathe. Another day is coming. Another road to walk. You always do. And somewhere beyond the cane, beyond the sea, beyond the maps drawn by men in coats and wigs, the world goes on as if none of this happened. But here in the barracks, in the damp wood and quiet murmurs, the truth remains. And it waits, quietly, without forgetting. Chapter 10. A Day in a Delft Pottery Workshop, Segment 1. The morning in Delft arrives not with songbirds or soft breezes, but with the sound of kilns cracking as they cool. The heat from the previous night's firing still radiates through the walls of the pottery workshop, rising from the stone floors and curling up through narrow chimney shafts. You wake to the scent of dust, wet clay, and ash, the familiar trio that clings to every tool and pour in this place. Your hands are already rough before the day begins, covered in a layer of chalky residue that never fully leaves. You sleep in a cot tucked behind the drying racks, a corner you share with 2 other apprentices. There's no door, no privacy, only the thick smell of glaze. And the faint ticking of the master's wall clock, never quite right, always fast by a minute or 2. The workshop is still dim when you rise, lit only by the early light slipping through warped glass panes. You wash your face from a basin that was clean once but has long since been tinted gray by years of mineral dust. You dress in a linen shirt already crusted with yesterday's powder and slip your feet into wooden clogs that have molded to your shape. There's no ceremony to the start of this day. There never is. The master does not speak when he enters. He simply removes his coat, ties on his apron, and lifts the first piece from the drying rack with hands that seem carved from stone. The kiln must be unloaded first. It has cooled enough for bare fingers to lift the trays. The smell as it opens is hard to describe, like burnt honey and brick, sharp and heavy, warming your lungs with every breath. Some of the pieces inside have survived the fire beautifully. Others have not. A plate has cracked along a hidden fault. A vase has slumped at one side. A tea set has emerged flawless. Its glaze is soft, gleaming white against the cobalt blue patterns etched beneath. These will be placed carefully on the top shelf, marked for the merchant from Haarlem. The ruined ones go to a corner pile, their fate to be ground down or reused if possible. You carry the shelves one by one to the main table, each load balanced between 2 calloused palms, each step measured so as not to disturb the powdery floor. The work begins slowly with mixing. The glazes must be stirred, the pigments ground again with mortar and pestle. The blue the color Delft is famous for is made from cobalt oxide, shipped from far away and carefully rationed. Too much, and it spreads too thickly. Too little, and it fades to gray. You've learned this through failure. Everyone here has. There's no perfect formula. There is only experience, judgment, and a little luck. You sit at your station, a narrow bench near the window, and begin painting. The plate in front of you is smooth and white, but not yet fired for color. You dip your brush, fine as a needle, into the blue and draw the first curve of a flower stylized. Not realistic. Its petals shaped more like wind than botany. You paint by memory now. The patterns have been repeated so often they live in your muscles. Sometimes you wonder if you could do it with your eyes closed. Beside you, another apprentice works more slowly. He is younger, careful but hesitant. His lines wobble. He will be corrected later. The master tolerates mistakes, but not carelessness. This is not art, he says. It is craft. The difference, he insists, is that art may be forgiven. Craft must be precise. You take no offense. You no longer consider yourself an artist, if you ever did. You are a hand, a steady hand, a line. The room grows warmer as the day climbs. The sun does not shine directly through the dusty panes, but its light thickens, turning everything gold. You work without pause, stopping only for a small meal of bread and cheese, eaten while sitting on an overturned crate. You chew in silence, watching the glazes dry in their slow, invisible way. There are stories etched into the workshop too, though few speak them aloud. One of the apprentices is the son of a failed merchant. Another is a woman who pretends to be a boy to keep the job. The master himself was once a painter of churches, until the commissions dried up. Now he decorates teapots. You return to your bench. A stack of bowls waits, their surfaces blank and expectant. You begin again. Spirals, vines, fish. A bird perched on a tree. A windmill. A canal. A boat too small for sea but too fine for shore. Sometimes you slip in a detail that wasn't asked for. A face in the clouds. A dog behind a door. No one notices, or if they do, they don't say. The kill must be loaded by evening. The finished pieces are carried carefully, one by one, and placed inside on tiers of fire brick. The air inside the kiln is still warm. By tomorrow, it will be hot enough to turn paint into glass. You close the door with a soft thud and slide the wooden bolt into place. The master nods. The work is done for now. The room falls quiet, brushes are cleaned, benches wiped. The powder is swept from the floor into careful piles that will be used again. Waste is expensive here. Nothing is thrown away unless it cannot be helped. You sit again on your crate, your hands resting in your lap, your nails blue at the edges. Outside, the bell tower chimes, its sound muffled by the thick windows. A horse passes in the street. The sound of cartwheels rolls by. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs. You stare at the pieces drying near the window and wonder where they'll go. To a merchant's table in London, to a prince's cabinet in Vienna, to a widow's kitchen shelf in Bruges. Your hands will not follow them, but your patterns will. You will remain here, painting, tracing, blending, firing, always behind the curtain of usefulness, always just out of view, but you do not mind. There is comfort in repetition, in process, in placing beauty where there is only powder and clay. You lie in your cot that night and smell the fire rising in the kiln. It is not an unpleasant smell. It is the scent of work made solid, of dust becoming stone. The fire burns through the night. Though you cannot see it from your cot, you feel its presence in invisible pulse rising through the beams, radiating from the walls, as if the building itself breathes heat and discipline. The kiln glows behind its brick shell, locked tight, silent but alive. You lie still, the smell of glaze and firewood lingering in your hair and clothing, your muscles softening at last after hours of being taut and bent in labor. There's no blanket, only the warmth from the wall and the soft ache of fatigue wrapped around you like a second skin. You do not fall asleep quickly. Instead, you think not of escape, not even of change, but of the work, of the brush in your hand, the exact pressure needed to make a clean curve, the way cobalt thickens when it dries, the moment just before it cracks. You think of the bowl you ruined last week and the bowl you finished today. You think of how no one noticed, and yet both mattered in ways you can't quite explain. You remember a plate you once made with a crane hidden among the reeds, just one bird, just one stroke, and you wonder if someone in another city now eats from it, never knowing that a piece of your silence sits beneath their spoon. The studio at night is quiet in a different way than during the day. There is no scrape of chairs, no murmur of apprentices, no scolding from the master. Only the occasional creak from the rafters or the sudden snap of resin in the kiln's woodpile. The fire is never allowed to die while pieces are inside. It must burn steady, strong, unwavering. Just like the hands that created what it now tests. You drift into sleep eventually, your breath slowing, your limbs too heavy to move. You dream not of beauty or praise, but of shapes, arches, patterns, color blooming under flame. You wake once in the night to find your hand moving slightly, fingers curled as if still holding the brush. Morning comes with the thud of boots on the floor above and the groan of the wooden stairs under the master's weight. The same day again. And yet not quite. The fire is lower now. The piece is cooling slowly. Today they will emerge one by one, transformed. You rise, wash, dress. The studio fills with apprentices again, their voices low, their movements rehearsed. You stand beside the kiln as the master unbolts the door. The heat escapes first, a slow exhale, then the smell deep, sharp, and almost sweet. He removes the shells with thick gloves, setting them down one by one. You watch as the pieces appear, revealed like relics. Some gleam perfectly, the patterns crisp, the colors rich. Others bear flaws, an uneven edge, a glaze too thin, a hairline crack. The master does not sigh or curse. He simply separates them. His eyes are practiced, his judgment final. One of your plates is among the good ones. He sets it aside without a word, but you notice the way he turns it in his hand a moment longer than the others. That is enough. You carry it to the shelf with the merchant's mark. It will be wrapped, boxed, and sent downriver, then to Rotterdam, then on to wherever the buyer lives. It might end up in someone's cupboard or someone's collection. It might be used for 50 years and then broken in a storm, or it might outlive you, resting in a cabinet, admired in silence, its maker long forgotten. You do not sign your name on the back. That is not the custom. But you know which is yours, you always know. The rest of the day is spent preparing the next batch, wedging the clay, kneading it like bread, shaping it into forms that are still wet and heavy with potential. The wheel spins. Your hands shape the mound. It rises slowly into something recognizable, a vase, a jug. You learn not to push too hard. Clay remembers pressure. It splits under impatience. You keep your fingers loose and your breath even. There's no room for hurry in this place. Only rhythm. Later, a traveler visits the studio, a gentleman from The Hague who speaks too quickly and praises too freely. He buys a set of tiles and asks questions that make no sense. He asks how long it takes to make a plate. The master says, simply as long as it takes. The man laughs, does not understand. You do not speak. You've heard the same laugh before. It always comes from men who've never held clay. The visitor leaves, and the quiet returns. You scrub your tools, sweep the floors, blot your hands on a cloth that will never be clean again. The dust settles. The shadows grow longer. Another firing begins. More pieces go into the kiln. The cycle continues. You stretch your back and feel every muscle echo the motion, but it's not pain you resent. It's memory. You can feel yesterday's work still present in today's body. The lines you painted then have become part of you now. At the end of the day, you look around the studio, at the racks of finished pieces, at the others, packing boxes or sealing jars. No one speaks of legacy here. No one speaks of pride. But you all know that somewhere in another city, someone will drink from a cup whose curve you shaped. They will tilt their head at a brush stroke you made in silence. They may never know your name, but they will know your work. That is something. And so you lie in your cot again, the fire humming softly behind the wall, the scent of clay still clinging to your skin. The day is done. The work is not. And as your eyes close, you think not of fame or wealth, but of color. Of cobalt against white, of one line following another, of something small made well. Chapter 11. Amsterdam's Secret Jewish Press. The building appears unremarkable from the outside. A narrow brick facade along a quiet street in Amsterdam's eastern quarter. The kind of house that blends into the rows of others like it, with clean windows, whitewashed shutters, and no visible sign of what occurs inside. But when the door creaks open before sunrise and you slip inside, the world changes. The rhythm is the press, the hum of the ink roller, the shuffle of papers. The margins are filled with notes in Ladino, Hebrew, and Aramaic. He wants to print it next, a text on ethics. Perkai Avit, you nod. It's a good choice, but it's risky. It has been banned elsewhere. He knows. He's printed worse. The pages are printed until the lamp oil runs low, until the type is cleaned and locked, until the last folio is hung and drying. Only then do you rise and stretch. You wash your hands in cold water from a basin near the stairs, the ink bleeding from your skin like a second shadow. You dry them on a cloth so stained it looks dyed. Then you don your coat, blow out the lamp, and climb the stairs back to the surface. The door creaks open. The air is colder outside. The sun has slipped behind the canal houses, and the city glows with the quiet hush of early evening. A woman sweeps her steps. A baker rolls down his shutter. 2 children run past, holding sticks and laughing. You walk quietly down the street, your bag light, your thoughts heavier. You smile slightly, though it doesn't reach your eyes. Risks too. Until the next shipment leaves. Until the next manuscript arrives. Until the ink runs out. You do not ask for recognition. You will not be named in any registry, but the words will endure. The pages will travel, and somewhere in the hands of a stranger, in a place you've never seen, someone will read what you've helped create and feel for a moment that they are not alone, that they have not been forgotten, that even in exile, someone is still speaking to them, softly, from across the sea. The fines, the interrogations, the quiet disappearances. But still, you set the type. Still, you print the scratch of pen on ledger. The occasional whispered instruction. Outside, the city awakens slowly. The covers are plain, wrapped in parchment or rough linen, tied with simple cord. Some will be hidden beneath false bindings, wrapped in Calvinist sermons or ledgers of trade. Others will be smuggled out of the city in crates marked for Spanish merchants. You've even hollowed out candle molds before, packing entire chapters into wax. The words must leave, they must travel. There are people waiting, refugees in Poland, conversos in Antwerp, quiet scholars in London and Hamburg and beyond. They wait for these pages like others wait for bread. You have seen a man cry while holding a freshly printed prayer book. You have seen another kiss the pages before tucking them into his coat. You know what they mean. You feel it too. You can hear footsteps overhead, a child's voice, a cart clattering past on the cobbles, but inside the world remains enclosed. There are no windows in the cellar, only the flame of the lamp flickering against the stone, casting shadows that make the typecases look like low city walls, arranged in quiet defense. When morning comes, though the light never changes, a break is called. You sit on a low bench near the fire, eating from a cloth-wrapped bundle, hard cheese, a crust of rye, an apple if you're lucky. The others eat in silence. There are 5 of you today. All men, all from elsewhere. One is from Salonika, another from Hamburg. One wears a thick wool scarf even when it's warm, as if the cold of expulsion never left his bones. The 5th man never speaks of where he's from, only that he arrived with nothing and still has less. The hallway is narrow and cold, the air dense with the smell of ink, scorched oil, and damp paper. Down a staircase that seems too steep for safety lies the hidden room, a low, vaulted cellar lit by 2 oil lamps and warmed only by the press itself. A hulking wooden frame that dominates the space like a beast of burden. You do not speak as you enter. No one does. Voices are kept low, nearly silent. Sound travels, and ears are everywhere. You hang your coat on a nail, roll up your sleeves, and take your place at the typesetting table. Today, you are printing a portion of the Mishneh Torah Maimonides, great codification of Jewish law newly translated from Judeo-Arabic into Ladino, for exiles from Spain who have found refuge in the Dutch Republic. The pages are already laid out, lead type arranged in tight lines across the bed of the press, mirrored and backwards to the eye, but perfect to the page. Each letter has been placed by hand, each line aligned with the slow precision of a man carving his name into stone. You double-check every mark. A single mistake means a full page spoiled. There are no second chances when paper costs more than sleep. The master printer, a man named Eleazar, nods once and sets the dampened sheet on the tympan. You lower the platen carefully and pull the lever with your full weight. The wooden beam creaks, the press shudders, and the page is born. When you lift the platen and peel back the paper, you see the dark, sharp, aligned, alive. You hang it gently on the drying rack beside dozens of others where the scent of fresh ink sharpens the air. You wipe your hands, return to the type tray, and begin the next layout. Eleazar watches everything. He speaks softly, but with purpose. He once worked openly in Venice until the censors came. He fled to Amsterdam with nothing but a suitcase and his worn Torah scroll. Here, at least for now, the Republic tolerates him. Tolerates you. But it is not trust. It is not safety. Even in this freer city, there are limits. Dutch printers may publish Hebrew texts, but only under license. And even then. There are eyes, both Jewish and Christian, who scrutinize every page. watching for heresy, sedition, or unauthorized mysticism. What you print today is legal? Just barely. What you will print tomorrow may not be. You work without clock or bell. After the meal, work resumes. Eleazar shows you a new manuscript, delicate, handwritten, copied over generations. Later, you help bind the finished pages into folios. By afternoon, your back aches, your eyes blur, your hands sting from ink and wood splinters. But the work does not stop. It never does. You know you will return tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. The next morning brings a change in the air, not in the weather, which remains typically gray, or in the quiet cobbled streets that curve gently beside the canals, but in something subtler, slight stiffness in the way the door opens. A faint hesitation in Eleazar's step, the way the shutters upstairs have been drawn a little tighter than usual. You hear only fragments of their conversation through the floorboards, but you recognize the tones. It becomes a haven, a place where the act of printing feels like a kind of prayer. Each letter you place is a defiance of silence. Each page you bind is a quiet reply to centuries of exile. You begin setting the new text, the Perkai Avot, with more care than usual. The ethics feel heavier in your hands now. Each one identical, yet somehow distinct, hand-bound, hand-stitched, hand-checked. You wrap them in cloth, stack them in crates labeled for shipment, and whisper a brief blessing as the cart rolls away toward the harbor. You step into the darkened street with no moon overhead, only the faint glimmer of stars between drifting clouds. The canal beside you is silent. The water flat. Your hands are stained, your shoulders sore, your boots damp with ink-soaked dust. But your heart is steady. Tomorrow you will return. You always do. There's still more to print. You never know where they'll end up. Only that they go. That they move. That someone somewhere will open them, read them, and find something they thought they'd lost. A phrase? A law? A reminder? Something that says, you are still here, you are not forgotten. In a place where there are no men, one line reads, strive to be a man. Not from scripture, but from memory. Of a press in Portugal long ago, hidden beneath a barn, of pages burned by soldiers. Of a scroll buried beneath a vineyard, never found again. He speaks softly, not with sadness, but with acceptance. Ink washes away, he says. But the words, if they are read, if they are kept, they live longer than we do. You do not respond. You only nod. The fire pops quietly, and outside, the city sleeps. You pause over that line longer than you should, the letters blurred slightly by a drop of oil on the paper. You set the type again, this time perfectly. Outside, the city continues. The spice ships come and go. Bells toll softly from the Westerkirk. Dutch merchants haggle in the market, but down here, time folds differently. You breathe in gust and meaning. You ink your fingers with sacred lines. Measured questions. Flattering praise. A casual mention of licenses and religious council approvals. Eleazar answers gently, his tone softer when speaking to the boy. She says little, only that it was copied by her grandfather in Istanbul and carried here by ship after he died. She wants it preserved. Eleazar unwraps it gently. The script is fine, the parchment worn soft at the edges, the ink faded to brown. You watch as he turns the pages with reverence, then looks up and nods. It will be done, he says, and it will be, though the text is not urgent, nor famous, nor in high demand, it carries weight, the weight of memory, of journeys made and voices lost, and so it joins the pile for typesetting. And so the press turns again. He tells them stories as they bind the folios, of Jewish astronomers in Cordoba, of poets in Baghdad, of philosophers who mapped the stars in ink while hiding from torches. You listen to, though you've heard them before. Some nights you repeat them to yourself while lying in bed, as if the stories might carry you back through time to a place where such knowledge wasn't feared but celebrated. Yet you know better than to dream too deeply. The world above may tolerate you for now, but it does not embrace you. A single page misplaced, a wrong name spoken, a neighbor growing curious, that's all it would take. You lower your gaze and keep setting type, your fingers steady, your mind wandering. The visitor leaves an hour later with nothing but polite smiles and a promise to return. Eleazar descends the stairs more slowly than usual. His brow is heavy, his eyes tired. He says nothing as he resumes the work. That evening, he begins burning some old folio scraps, misprints, partial pages of texts long out of date. You offer to help, but he refuses. Some things are meant to be done in silence. You return to your workbench and continue proofreading a nearly complete sitter, scanning each prayer line for misaligned letters or smudged ink. Your eyes attuned to perfection that most readers will never notice. These small acts, these hidden labors, feel more fragile now, more precious. You notice these things without comment. Everyone does. It is not unusual for caution to rise suddenly, like mist from the river. A pamphlet was confiscated last week, printed too boldly and circulated too freely, its arguments against church corruption too sharply worded. Though it bore no connection to your press, the printers of Amsterdam form a kind of hidden fraternity, one where each tremor is felt across every basement, attic, and back room, in which ink stains the air and truth quietly stretches its limbs. You arrive before sunrise again. The cellar still smells of drying pages, lamp oil, and the faint metallic tongue of lead type warmed by use. You nod to the others. No one says much. There's nothing new to say. Just eyes that linger a moment too long on the door, hands that move a little faster over the type trays. Eleazar meets with a visitor upstairs that day, a man you've never seen before. Well-dressed, carrying a satchel and a trimmed beard too neat for your comfort. As days pass, the cellar becomes more than a workshop. The youngest apprentice begins asking questions about the texts, about the laws, about why some words are printed larger than others. The cellar gains a new visitor the following week. She is a woman, quiet but sharp-eyed, who brings with her a manuscript wrapped in oilcloth. By month's end, you have printed nearly 100 copies of the new volume. One night, after the work is done and the fire in the stove has dimmed to orange coals, Eleazar tells you a story. You close the shop that night with care, locking each latch, dousing each lamp. Chapter 12, The Ship Captain's Quarters. Privilege at Sea. The sea is a world unto itself. And aboard a Dutch East India Company vessel, hierarchy is the law more than the wind or tide. From the moment you set foot on the thick planks of the main deck, slick with salt and sweat, you sense the rigid divide that governs life on board. Below you, dozens of sailors haul rope, scrape barnacles, and swab the wood with aching backs and blistered hands. Their world smells of fish, damp canvas, and hardtack softened by brine. But above them, quite literally, the captain resides in another realm. His quarters rest beneath the stern deck, protected by polished doors and glass-paneled windows, where light spills in uninterrupted and the air carries not the sting of rot, but the faint scent of tobacco and spice. You are not a sailor. You are the captain, and the space is yours. You wake not to the lash of the boatswain's whistle, but to the gentle creak of wood, the low groan of hull meeting wave, and the knock of your steward arriving with morning broth coffee, if stocks allow, and the latest readings from the ship's log. Your bed is narrow but clean, your linen still white where they don't brush the salt-stained walls. You sit, stretch, and feel the sway of the sea beneath your boots. You know what today holds: a course to correct, a mutter to silence, and a letter to read again and again, orders from the company, sealed and signed, commanding both authority and caution. Your cabin is both a sanctuary and a stage. The long table at the center serves as dining area, chart desk, and conference room. Maps unfurl across its surface, weighed down by pewter candle holders and compass sets. A locked drawer contains letters of credit and company contracts, promises of payment and secrecy both. The walls are decorated with maps, hunting scenes, a painting of a Dutch port you haven't seen in years. Every object speaks of a life more refined than that lived on deck, yet none of it feels luxurious. The ship sways always. Even power must learn to balance. You dress in wool breeches, a long coat with brass buttons, and boots rubbed with seal fat to keep out the moisture. The steward helps brush the salt from your collar. You glance in the mirror, another item no sailor owns, and note the fatigue growing in your eyes. Then you ascend to the quarterdeck. From here, the sea stretches endlessly, gray and rippling like hammered tin beneath the pale morning light. The crew is already at work. The first mate barks orders. A boy climbs the rigging, his fingers raw from rope burns. A carpenter mutters about a leak near the hold. You watch it all, silently. Authority does not shout. It watches. It measures. It waits. You speak to the first mate about the charts, pointing toward the east wind and the need to correct course. He nods and passes your orders down. You will not touch the wheel today. You haven't in weeks, but your hands still remember it. Below deck, the men eat salted pork and weevil-riddled biscuit. They drink water gone stale and sour. You take your meals separately in your cabin from covered dishes brought by the steward. The meat is the same pork, dried fish, but better kept. The bread is less chewed by bugs. You sip wine from a small pewter cup, not every day, just when the sea is calm. One luxury at a time. You reread the company's sealed instructions once more as you eat. They say little clearly. They hint at valuable cargo, dangerous waters, delicate negotiations in Batavia. The Dutch Republic may fly its flag proudly, but its ships rely on subtext and diplomacy as much as on firepower. You keep the pistol hidden beneath your mattress, a last resort, and not all danger comes from the sea. When the weather turns, your quarters become your refuge. Outside, the sails groan under wind. The crew secures barrels and ropes, and the waves slap the hull with cold fury. You sit at your desk, writing in the logbook with ink that runs when damp. You record the wind direction, the speed, the morale. Always morale. It rises and falls like tide, never predictable. You notice one sailor has grown quiet, sullen. Another has taken to whispering below decks. You say nothing, but you watch. You speak with the quartermaster. Quietly, you remind him who signs his pay. Mutiny begins not with knives, but with silence. Later, you dine with the ship surgeon. His hand shakes slightly. He complains about the mold on his bandages, the lack of lemon for scurvy, the smell of infection that never quite leaves the sick bay. You listen, nod, offer him a cigar. He accepts. His loyalty is useful. He has a ledger of his own, one filled with ailments and accidents, broken fingers, lost teeth, fevers that linger for weeks. No deaths yet on this voyage. That's a small mercy. You sleep with one eye open nonetheless. That night, you step into the cold, just outside your cabin, and look up at the stars. They glitter like shards of bone against the black sky, unmoving, unknowable. You recognize a few: the Southern Cross, the Arc of Cassiopeia. You measure their place against your charts. You whisper to yourself the names you learned years ago from an old captain long since buried at sea. The ocean humbles even as it weighs. The stars do not care who commands the ship. You return to your quarters and remove your coat, your boots, your belt. You store the letters back in the drawer, lock it, and place the key beneath your pillow. As you lie in your bunk, the boards groan around you. You can hear the crew below, talking softly, playing dice, coughing. One of them hums a lullaby song from Friesland or Zealand. A reminder that they are still men, still dreaming, even as you chart a course that leads them farther from home. You close your eyes, knowing that come morning you will wake again to the same desk, the same ink, the same storm of decisions waiting outside your polished door. You wake before the light. The ship creaks with the slow, steady sound of movement, and the air is thick with salt and the heavy stillness of open water. You've done it many times before, but each time feels different. You must include the nature of the cargo, list each man's duties, and offer your impression of discipline. You step outside briefly to survey the rigging. A buoy in the crow's nest waves down, signaling a ship on the horizon. Your spyglass confirms it, a merchant vessel, small, likely Danish. No flag raised yet, you issue no orders. The ship is too far to be a threat, too slow to be a match. Still, the tension rises slightly among the officers. The quartermaster moves more quickly. A quiet inspection of the small arms chest. You will smile as you do it. You will commend the carpenter for his repairs, ask the cook about his salt levels, nod to the youngest sailor who lost a boot in the storm. You will hold the ship together not with rope or plank, but with silence and decision. And no one will know how tightly you are gripping the wheel, even when you're not touching it. The lookout doesn't blink. This is how it is at sea. Calm masks caution. Smiles conceal calculation. The sea is wide, but the margin for error is razor thin. It's a performance as much as a record. You write slowly, choosing your words with care. The smell reminds you of your childhood, but the warmth does not comfort. He brings a copy of the Psalms and a bottle of rough wine. You speak not of God, but of judgment, of trust, of duty. He tells you that sailors speak of omens again. A gull seen too far from land, a dream of fire. You nod. You've heard it all before. Yet still, it unsettles you. The chaplain prays softly. You do not join. You simply listen. When he leaves, you sit for a long time at your desk, staring at the flame of the lantern until it gutters. You consider the pistol beneath your mattress. You remember the story of the Batavia, the madness, the mutiny, the blood. And you know you are not exempt. Authority protects. But it also isolates. You read through the ship's manifest again as you eat. Spices, dyes, cloth bolts, glass beads, muskets. The muskets are locked in a chest below. You have the key. No one else does. Their presence on board is both a shield and a temptation. They are meant for sale in the Indies, but if needed, they are for defense or control. Sufficient morale. No insubordination noted. Weather remains favorable. Each line true enough to pass, each omission deliberate. You don't mention the carpenter's quiet complaints about the hull's stress points. You rise barefoot and check the charts again. Nothing is wrong, but something feels thin in the air, stretched too tight. You pace the cabin. You sit. You rise again. You drink cold water. You read the company's instructions a final time. They say so much by saying nothing at all. Maintain discretion. Secure necessary interests. Avoid delay. Orders written in sand, meant to guide but not to save. You fold the paper and press it beneath a book. Then you lie back down. You listen to the wood, the wind, the sea. You feel the ship beneath you like a heart beneath a rib cage, pulsing, patient, and always watching. You don't include the fact that 2 sailors have begun stealing dried apples from the quartermaster's store. These are not failures yet. They are warnings. And they are yours to keep, not to confess. It is quiet, too quiet. You dress quickly, feeling the press of responsibility even before your boots touch the floor. Sealed, not company wax. Red instead of black. That means politics. That means something sent from another captain, or perhaps from a port agent hoping to curry favor. You break the seal. Inside is a brief report from a fellow VOC captain warning of hostile vessels near the Sunday Strait French, or possibly Portuguese. Unconfirmed, but troubling. You fold the letter slowly, nod to your mate, and say nothing more. You place the paper in your drawer and lock it. You will adjust course, slightly tomorrow. No need to alarm the crew with vague threats. Better to wait until the wind shifts. Better to keep the burden quiet. No one else stirs in the captain's quarters. Outside your room, however, the crew is already beginning to wake footsteps overhead, the sound of buckets sloshing on deck, a rope being hauled and fastened. You glance at the compass on your wall, still holding steady, south by southeast, toward Java, toward Batavia, toward the Company S next order, and the merchants waiting with ledgers open and voices smooth as velvet. You wash with cold water from a ceramic basin, then dry your face with a cloth that smells faintly of cedar. Breakfast is brought by your steward. Salted cod and hard biscuit, washed down with a half cup of beer. The ship's cook sends what he can, but the supplies are thinning. Every day closer to port is another day of declining rations. Another day of watching crew morale bend like the sails in a crosswind. Today you must write a report. Not for the crew nor even the company, but for the governor at the colonial port. You pause when you hear a knock. It's the first mate holding a folded letter. Afternoon brings a change in weather. The sun sharpens, the breeze stiffens, and the sails snap with more force. You dine alone that evening. The steward sets the table with care linen cloth, a chipped silver fork, a bowl of stew made from dried peas and smoked meat. After dinner, you invite the ship's chaplain to your quarters. That night, you cannot sleep. The wind howls harder, and the hull groans in a way you do not like. Come morning, you will issue new instructions. A minor change of heading. A revised watch schedule. Chapter 13. Anatomy Lessons and Public Curiosity. In the crisp stillness of a Leiden winter morning, long before the sun clears the gabled rooftops and the frost melts from the cobblestones, the hall of the Surgeons' Guild begins to stir. A chill clings to the stone walls, heavy with centuries of moisture and memory, but soon it will be warmed not by fires, but by bodies. You arrive early, walking slowly past shuttered storefronts and frozen canals, your breath clouding the air in little puffs. The crowd will come soon, but for now you are one of the first. A small line has already begun to form near the entrance, where a thick oak door beneath a carved lintel awaits its audience. Tickets were sold days ago. Not everyone who wants to watch will fit inside. Not everyone will be brave enough to stay. The Anatomy Theater is unlike any other chamber in the city. It is part laboratory, part cathedral, part stage. Circular and steep, it rises tier upon tier in dark wood benches, all facing inward toward a cold central slab. Overhead, the domed ceiling traps every whisper, every breath, and amplifies it like the voice of judgment. Above the slab, a single skylight lets in the pale morning sun, and dust swirls in the beam as if it, too, has come to witness. Shelves built into the walls house preserve specimens, wax models, and strange instruments, saws, hooks, knives of varying length and curve. They are arranged with pride. This is a place of learning, a place of revelation, and yet there is an unmistakable hush of ritual in the air. You take your seat near the middle bench and glance around. Others file in, now merchants in fine coats, students with ink-stained fingers, women in fur-lined cloaks pretending not to look too closely. No one speaks above a murmur. They sip wine from small silver flasks. Some bring apples or roasted nuts. There is a festival air to it all, but it never slips into laughter. Everyone knows this is no ordinary show. The dissection begins once the bell tolls. The subject is already prepared. He lies beneath a white cloth, stiff from the cold and the hours of waiting. His name is not announced. It rarely is. Most know, however, that he was a thief caught stealing bolts of cloth from a shipyard storehouse and condemned to death. He was hanged 3 days ago, and his body preserved in snow until today. He is here not as a man, but as a lesson, a rare privilege, a final use. The Surgeons' Guild performs only a handful of public dissections each year. Each one is attended with reverence and whispered awe. For some, it is the only chance they will ever have to see beneath the skin, to gaze directly at the machinery of life and death. At last, the door behind the slab opens and a surgeon enters. He is dressed in a dark wool robe, the collar pressed stiff, the buttons silver. His hands are gloved in thin linen, not for sanitation, but for modesty. He is accompanied by 2 assistants who carry trays of tools and thick-bound notebooks. The murmuring fades to silence. The surgeon clears his throat, bows slightly, and begins. His voice is low and steady, more suited to the pulpit than the market. He speaks first of the purpose, not spectacle, but instruction, not punishment, but progress. He reminds the audience that all knowledge comes at cost, and that this cost has already been paid. Then, with practiced grace, he folds back the cloth. The man's chest is pale and tight with the cold. The surgeon places his hand upon the sternum, presses gently, then selects a blade. The first cut is shallow, deliberate, running from collar to navel in a straight line. There is no sound but the slicing of skin. A few viewers look away, others lean closer. The surgeon narrates as he works, explaining muscle structure, pointing out layers of fascia, describing the movement of lungs, the placement of ribs. He uses Latin sparingly. His words are careful, chosen to soothe as much as to inform. Observe the diaphragm, he says, and note how it divides the breath from the bread. Some chuckle quietly. He smiles. He has done this before. As the dissection continues, so does the transformation of the room. What began as morbid curiosity slowly becomes focus. The crowd, once jittery, now leans in, scribbling notes, exchanging glances, whispering terms. A merchant asks whether a certain muscle affects speech. A student inquires about the liver. The surgeon answers all with calm authority. The assistants pass around small jars preserved lungs, a portion of intestine, a calcified heart valve. Each is handled with delicate fingers, as though the jar itself might breathe. The audience is learning. But more than that, they are being reshaped. Whatever they believed of the human body before today, they will leave with different thoughts. Some will dream of meat and bone for weeks. Others will avoid their own reflections, their own hands. A few will seek the surgeon out, begging to study further, to learn the secrets hidden beneath every touch. Outside, the city continues on. Bells ring. Boats unload herring. A child throws snowballs against a wall. But here, time has suspended itself. The corpse on the table is no longer merely a man. He has become a map, a guide, a final teacher. His hands are curled like dead leaves. His face, exposed now, shows nothing of his former life. The surgeon pauses, wipes his brow, and begins to explain the nerves of the forearm. He traces them like strings on a lute, his blade barely touching. His voice is almost tender now. See how the hand connects not only to labor, but to memory. We carry what we do here, he says, in our joints. We are history in motion. The first half of the dissection ends with a brief prayer, not for the dead, but for wisdom. The crowd applauds politely. The assistants cover the body again with the cloth, now stained and sunken. The benches begin to empty. The wine flasks are capped. The doors open to the bright winter air. You remain seated for a moment longer, the echo of the surgeon's words still hanging in the air. Then, slowly, you rise, walk the steps upward, and step back into the light of the city, where the world seems both familiar and strangely new. The second half begins as the shadows grow longer, stretching across the cobbled streets like ghostly fingers as the winter sun begins its slow descent. The air is colder now, and yet more people arrive than before. Those with midday business have finished their errands and now return, hoping to catch what they missed. The early audience, if they left at all, has moved up in the benches to make room. And so the theater fills again, the wood creaking beneath boots and cloaks, the soft murmur of renewed anticipation rising toward the dome above. The surgeon reappears, his robes dusted with flour from a quick midday meal, his gloves changed, his voice steady. His face betrays no fatigue. But you see it in his hands. In a way, he takes a moment longer to select the next tool. In the quiet breath he draws before pulling the cloth away once more. The body lies just as it did before, but now it's changed. The chest is open, the ribs parted. The organs exposed are darkened by time and air. The cloth once white is now rust-hued in places, a quiet reminder of what has passed. The surgeon does not pause. He begins at the abdominal cavity, his voice firm yet soft as he gestures toward the liver, the stomach, the bowels. He compares them to the diagrams etched into his students' textbooks, and then, slowly, delicately, corrects those diagrams in real time. Observe how this organ swells larger than expected, he murmurs, likely a result of alcohol or poor diet. A few murmurs ripple through the crowd. Someone whispers a name, perhaps a baker or a cooper known for excess. Another silences them. Laughter has no place here now. He begins to remove each organ in turn, placing them on a metal tray. Not with violence, but with care. Like a librarian returning books to a shelf, the lungs are collapsed. The heart is firm. The stomach, when opened, reveals bread crust and something harder, perhaps bone. The surgeon does not dwell on it. He simply notes the evidence, the possible conclusions, and continues. The brain will come later, he says. That must be done carefully, reverently. But first he invites a question. A hand rises. A woman older asks whether the man could have felt anything in his final moments. The surgeon pauses. Then gently, he explains how death quiets the nerves, how pain becomes memory, how the body forgets before the mind does. He doesn't say it, but all can feel it. The suggestion that something lingers after life ends, even if science cannot yet prove it. As the hour deepens, the tone shifts again. The dissection moves to the face. The audience leans in with quiet discomfort. The surgeon removes the lower jaw, explains the connections of tongue to throat, the folds of skin to muscle. His assistant sketches quickly, charcoal on thick paper, recording the angles and hollows. It is not grotesque. It is solemn. The dead man, once anonymous, now has become something more complex, not just a body, not quite a person, but a presence. A mirror. And in that presence, the audience begins to see pieces of themselves. A merchant touches his cheek absent-mindedly. A student fingers the space beneath his chin. The surgeon does not slow. He speaks of sinews, of ligaments, of the interplay between form and function. This, he says, gesturing toward the sinewy cords behind the jaw, is what lets you chew, speak, weep. A few close their eyes, as if hearing too much. The final act is the skull. The surgeon scores the scalp, peels it back, and gently saws the bone, the rasping sound filling the chamber like the scraping of ice on glass. When the top is lifted, he reveals the brain smaller than expected, coiled like a curled animal in winter sleep. He speaks of humors of memory, of the shape of thought. He is cautious here, more philosophical than precise. We know so little, he admits, and yet we seek so much. The assistants step forward, offering tools, pointing out arteries and folds. One recites passages from Galen, another from Vesalius. The surgeon finally goes quiet. He simply stands there, eyes downcast, and lets the silence settle in. When he speaks again, it is to close. He offers no grand conclusions, only observations. The body is remarkable, he says, the mind elusive. Knowledge is a flame, flickering, and those who tend it must never grow arrogant. He thanks the man on the table, now entirely still, more artifact than flesh. He thanks the crowd for their attention. And he thanks the silence which has allowed all this to unfold. The cloth is drawn once more. The audience stands. A few remain seated, unmoving. One student weeps, quietly, wiping his eyes with a sleeve. A woman places a small coin on the bench before leaving. A gesture of gratitude, or guilt. Outside, evening has begun. Snowflakes fall softly, turning the narrow streets into rivers of silver and shadow. The canal reflects the lamplight. The bell tower tolls 6. You walk home slowly, hands tucked into your coat, the memory of the anatomy hall lingering not in your mind but in your body. Every breath feels deeper, every step more deliberate. You pass others who also attended, but none of you speak. What words are there? You shared something unspeakable, something intimate and public, something between science and mourning. That night you find it hard to sleep, not because of horror, but because of awe. You replay the day not as spectacle, but as story. A man lived, a man died, a man taught, and through that something changed in you. You cannot name it, but it is there, in your hands, in your heartbeat, in the way you stare at your own reflection and wonder what lies beneath. The dissection has ended, but the learning has not. It never does. Chapter 14, Painting the Dutch Dream, A Day with Rembrandt's Rivals. The air in the painter's studio is thick with the scent of linseed oil, powdered pigment, and old wood. Light filters in through tall, mullioned windows, dust catching the morning sun in tiny golden threads. You arrive before dawn like you do every day, unlocking the door with a heavy iron key and stepping into a world of canvases, turpentine, and silent ambition. This is not Rembrandt's studio. There's no queue of wealthy patrons waiting at the door. Add a sharper wrinkle at the brow, a hint of calculation to the mouth. Enough to balance the kindness. Enough to keep truth in memory and quiet negotiation. Painting is compromise. Between patron and artist, between beauty and honesty, between silence and all that cannot be spoken. The hours pass. You light 2 candles and keep working, their flames flickering against the varnished wall. The portrait is nearly done. The hands still need refining. The tulip fields in the distant background must be made softer, less precise. Memory is never sharp at the edges. Your apprentice packs away the pigments, cleans the brushes, stacks the sketches. He leaves with a yawn and a promise to return early. You stay behind, finishing the last few strokes in silence. When you finally step away, your neck aches, your eyes sting, but the painting breathes. Not as Rembrandt's do loud and filled with shadow, but quietly, steadily, like a whisper in a crowded room. You do not sign it yet. That comes later, when the silver is paid. Noon arrives, marked only by the hunger in your belly and the warmth retreating from the floor. Your apprentice serves bread and dried herring on a wooden board. You eat while still holding the brush, eyes never leaving the canvas. A mistake in shadow now means hours of correction later, and time, like paint, must be spent carefully. No famous name etched into the wood above the lintel. You nod, smile politely, listen as he describes their outfits in excessive detail. He wants his son's medals shown prominently. His daughter's pearls must gleam. He hands you a miniature for reference, her cheeks too smooth, eyes too large. You will need to soften it, make her more real. He does not stay long, just enough to convey importance, to remind you that his silver speaks louder than your talent. When he leaves, your apprentice groans. Another dinner painting, he mutters. You shush him gently. He does not yet know how many canvases are built on boredom. Just you, your apprentice's hands already stained with ochre, and a persistent hum of work that rarely pauses long enough to be recognized. But inside, time has slowed to the pace of pigment drying on canvas. You test a new mixture of brown umber with a touch of bone black. It darkens the corners of the scene, grounds the widow's memory in something richer, sadder. You wonder if she will notice. Probably not. She will look only at the face, the hands. The illusion of permanence in a world where everything eventually fades. That is your trade. Not truth, not beauty, but preservation. You capture what they fear will be forgotten, and for a time they pay well for that. You sweep the floor first, always the floor. Pigment, dust settles like fine snow over every surface, and even the soles of your boots leave prints in shades of burnt sienna and lead white. The boards creak underfoot, worn smooth by years of pacing, pausing, and dreaming. On the central easel sits the day as labor, a portrait commissioned by a merchant's widow. She has asked for her late husband to be depicted holding the account books he once pored over, flanked by the very tulip fields he never visited but so loved to speak of. It is a fantasy, of course, but fantasy sells. So you sketch out the hand with care, placing fingers around the leather binding with practiced ease, and begin layering thin washes of paint that will, after a dozen passes, suggest the softness of life. You do not rush. Each stroke matters. Each shadow carries a decision. You hum quietly to yourself as you work, aware of the silence behind you where your own apprentice grinds pigment in a mortar. The rhythmic clink echoing like a heartbeat, vermilion, ultramarine, malachite. These are not just colors. They are currencies. You count them like coins. As the light strengthens, a knock sounds at the door. A potential buyer, or perhaps another artist come to barter stories or gossip. You wipe your hands, open the door, and admit a young man in a thick wool cloak. He carries a portfolio and the slight unease of someone unsure of his place. You offer him coffee, thin and bitter, poured from a tin pot resting near the hearth. He does not drink. Instead, he asks if you've heard Rembrandt is working on another self-portrait. You nod, say nothing. You have lost count of how many Rembrandt has made of himself. Some say it is vanity. Others say it is vision. You suspect it is both, but you do not say that. Instead, you show the young man your current commission. He studies it for a long moment, then says, "The face looks too kind." "He was cruel," he adds, "to my uncle. Took his land in a debt dispute." You pause. Perhaps this man was more than just a visitor. Perhaps he wanted to see that cruelty corrected on canvas. But you do not paint revenge, at least not openly. After he leaves, you return to the easel. You change the eyes slightly. The afternoon brings a different challenge. A city alderman arrives with a commission, a group portrait of his family seated at a banquet. Outside, the city bustles. Horses clatter across bridges. The canal glints like spilled ink. A child calls out from a window. Evening falls. The light turns golden, then gray, then gone. The morning after feels colder. The fire has gone out in the hearth, and the coals are gray and lifeless. You rise stiffly, wrapping your coat around your shoulders before you unlock the shutters. Pale light drips into the studio, weak and wintry, catching the corners of half-finished canvases and curled sketches that litter the floor. The painting you finished last night sits drying on the easel, the widow's husband gazing outward with that faint tension between memory and myth. Not to display your work, but to settle your dues. Expensive, but required for the next commission. A wedding portrait for a wealthy couple. The bride wants her gown to shimmer. The groom wants to be painted standing beside a globe, as if all the world lay at his feet. It shows a narrow room, a tall window, a single chair by the fire. You painted it when times were good. You never finished it, but sometimes when the light is right, it feels finished anyway. You think of that now, as you snuff out the candles and lock the door behind you. The wind off the canal bites your skin. The night is clear, and the stars glimmer like pigment too fine. You walk home slowly, your hands rough, your boots stained with oil. Tomorrow, you will paint again, quietly, steadily, in the shadow of giants, but always with light in your hands. You nod, take the pigments, and begin to test them on a scrap of canvas. Your apprentice asks if you've heard about the new exhibition being planned at the guild. He says they might invite Rembrandt. You nod again, not looking up. He asks if you'll enter something. You pause, then you say quietly, maybe. But you know you won't. Competitions demand flair. You deal in restraint. The clerk eyes your coins and makes a small note in the ledger. On the walls hang the works of other painters, some better, some worse, some long dead. You study a landscape by a man whose name no one says aloud anymore. Once he was celebrated. Now he's a footnote. You wonder if your work will hang like that someday, forgotten except by archivists and dust. Back in the studio, you try to shake the feeling. You work on the brewer's face, adjusting the mouth to give just a hint of authority. You darken the shadows under the eyes, soften the lines of the jaw. You want him to look important, but not arrogant. That's the balance they all want. The illusion of greatness, not its burden. You study the eyes. They look back at you with something like suspicion. Or perhaps it's just your own tiredness staring through the brushstrokes. Candles flicker along the windowsill. The day ends as so many others have, with tired hands and quiet thoughts. You look at the portrait on the easel, the brewer now halfway to life. He will not be remembered a century from now. Perhaps neither will you, but for now you give him shape, dignity, and warmth. It is enough. You sign your name on the bottom corner of the canvas you finished last night. Not large, not elaborate. Just a name and a year, the moment captured. You move on, avoiding sentiment. The widow will collect the portrait next week. You'll wrap it carefully, and she'll nod politely, and the silver will clink onto the table like absolution. There are new commissions to plan. You unroll a blank canvas and stare at it while sipping lukewarm coffee. It is the beginning of another portrait, this time of a brewer who insists on being painted with a tankard in one hand and his accounting ledgers in the other. A former patron, an elderly magistrate whose portrait you painted 3 years ago, arrives unannounced. He is thinner now, more frail, and walks with a silver-handled cane. You help him into a chair, offer him wine. He declines. Instead, he looks around the studio with a softness in his gaze. I sometimes wonder, he says, what happens to all these faces after we're gone? You pause, unsure he means the paintings or the people in them. You say something vague about legacy, about memory. He nods, then chuckles to himself. The painting you did of me, it hangs in my study. I don't recognize the man anymore. You both sit in silence for a moment. Then he rises, shakes your hand, and leaves without another word. You return to your canvas, the silence now heavier. He wants to be shown as both jovial and intelligent. You sketch the outline of his shoulders, noting the wideness of his frame, the way his coat sits uncomfortably above his stomach. As you draw, you think of Rembrandt again, of how his portraits never flattered. of how he once painted a surgeon mid-dissection and gave the corpse more gravity than the living. You do not have that kind of bravery. Or perhaps you have a different kind. Yours is the courage to paint what people want to see, to keep your household fed and your apprentice paid. It is not celebrated, but it is necessary. Midday brings a visitor you did not expect. Later that day, you visit the guild hall. As evening nears, your apprentice returns with fresh pigment, carmine, indigo, a small amount of gold leaf. When the sun sets, the city outside the windows dims into shadow. In the corner of the studio sits a small, unfinished painting, one you began years ago. It is not a commission. It is not meant for sale. So now, as the waves settle and the lanterns fade, you find yourself standing at the quiet edge of all that has passed. Behind you lies the clang of hammers in the Amsterdam shipyard, the crash of waves upon the Batavia's doomed hull, the hush of an anatomy theater filled with candlelight and awe. You have walked through markets flush with tulip dreams, and across the polished banquet floors of merchant guild halls, where silver glinted and foreign spices danced in the air. You've stood in the frozen mist of the Arctic, clung to the decks of spice ships bound for Banda, wandered down silent canals with mapmakers and traders, and stepped into the shadows of painters working under Rembrandt's long gaze. Each place offered you a glimpse, not of glory or grandeur, but of the hands that held history up from beneath. Calloused hands, quiet hands. Hands that built, harvested, stitched, bound, loaded, painted, and endured. The world we know was never shaped by those who toasted from silver cups alone. It was shaped by those who walked barefoot in sawdust, who rose before the sun, who painted until their backs ached, who pressed ink into paper while looking over their shoulders. In each chapter of this journey, the Dutch Golden Age revealed itself not as a singular glow, but as a light cast unevenly, brightest in the homes of merchants and admirals, flickering in the corners where sailors slept on damp hammocks and widows waited for ships that never returned. The contradictions of the age rise up like the spires of old churches, majestic from afar, but often built on foundations laid by sweat and silence. A painting admired in a guild hall might have been created by a man who hadn't eaten that day. A handful of nutmeg grating into a noble woman's stew might have cost another man his home. Even maps, those proud declarations of the known world, were filled with guesses and ghosts. It is easy, from the soft perch of the present, to see only the achievements, the grand paintings, the tall ships, the polished Delft tiles. But the rhythm of that world was driven by thousands of small, invisible sacrifices. And yet, in the stillness of this moment, as you lie back and allow the day to blur, you can almost hear their stories still humming in the woodwork. The carpenter in the shipyard bent over the curved keel as lamplight flickered against resin-stained walls. The mapmaker's apprentice dipping his quill into ink, trying to steady his hand even as the candle trembled. The enslaved field laborer in Suriname, watching the sky change color, while longing for a home he could no longer name. These lives are not footnotes. They are the body of history. The breath between paragraphs, the part that rarely makes it into paintings or ledgers or textbooks, but without which nothing would have been built, bought, or remembered. Think of the quiet painter again. Not Rembrandt, but the one across town, the one who never signed his works in bold, who never sold a canvas for more than a sack of grain, but who still woke up each morning and painted as if someone someday might look closely. Or the young woman working in the spice warehouse, wrapping precious cloves into waxed bundles, her fingers blistered but precise. These were people not seeking greatness, but endurance, not seeking fame, but peace. Their reward was not recognition. It was completion. The ship set afloat, the letter pressed and folded, the painting dried and hung. And in that modest fulfillment, there's something profoundly human, something timeless. As the world outside your window darkens now, and the hum of modern life recedes into distant static, you are free to carry their stories with you, not as burdens, but as ballast. Stories like smooth stones in your pocket. You are not expected to remember every date or every name, only to remember the feeling of hands at work, the flicker of lamplight on rough wood, the slow, steady rhythm of a world built not in haste, but in quiet perseverance. History is not a chorus of kings and battles. It is a low, constant hum, a lullaby made of footsteps, echoes, whispers. And tonight, that lullaby carries you gently from the crowded wharves of the 1600s into the hush of your own room, where the floor does not creak under the weight of centuries, and the air does not sting of salt or sawdust. You have wandered far through the Dutch Golden Age, and though it is distant now, though its sails and spices have long since scattered across time, something of it lingers with you. A faint scent of linseed oil, the cold comfort of a canal breeze, the steady pulse of a world in motion, always turning, always reaching. Let it settle into your chest now like a long exhale. Let it drift through your thoughts like light across old varnish. The ships have returned to harbor. The paint has dried. The fires are low. And there's nothing left for you to but rest. Thank you for drifting through history with us. If you enjoyed this quiet journey into the past, gently tap subscribe and let the drowsy historian be your guide whenever sleep feels far away. Until next time, rest well, dream deeper, and remember, history is never in a hurry.